Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Moore, now featuring Ross Fulton, also with Mark Kivler and Kevin Noon over here. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always, waiting for Kevin to mute himself. Thank you, Kevin. Welcome to you all. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's great. I'm so happy to be here. We had talked about, what should we do the day before the game? And it was like, what if we did the whole squad here thing? And frankly, if Alex Gleitman thinks having 3 kids and being 600 miles away is an excuse, I mean, okay, I guess Tony, I guess I'm just built different.
Well, it is good to be here at our Grandview office, the Grandview studio. Welcome you all. Throw your questions in there. We're going to be talking Ohio State, Michigan for the next foreseeable future until tomorrow night at some point, basically. But throw your questions in there. We'll get to them. We've got Ross here, special featured guest. So let's get right into some of this X's and O's stuff because the injury to Travion Henderson, we don't know if he's going to play. Why are Mayan Williams and Dallin Hayden more suited for a successful running game of late than Travion Henderson?
Yeah, I mean, whether it's the foot that's causing issues or it's maybe a combination. Sometimes someone gets injured, it gets in their head a little bit, they start pressing. I just, it became pretty stark against Maryland that it sort of playing into maybe his worst instincts, and he's just trying to bounce everything. Like, that started out as a problem on their base stretch play, but it kind of expanded into everything they were trying to do on Saturday. They weren't, yes, they ran stretch some, but they also run in like inside zone. They were running duo. They were trying to find things that worked with him. And I just think he was struggling. I would, as Tom and I have talked about before, like I wouldn't necessarily say that Mayan Williams is like the best stretch runner of all time. He tends to bounce a little bit as well. But, when you get him going downhill and inside zone, he's very quick in the hole. And then, Dallin Hayden, obviously this would be a big jump up in stage, but he's very natural at running stretch or really running anything and getting upfield. Like, he'll take one cut and go. If anything, there's a couple of times when I was watching the game and I was like, he probably could have bounced that one. But, like, he just is not going to do it. Like, he's going to get inside as soon as he sees his blockers turned, he's cutting inside of them. So, I think for Ohio State, like, really the issue this year throughout with the run game has never been like, they're getting 2 yards a carry average. It's like they'd have a bunch of 5-yard runs, but then they'd have like runs for negative yards, like get stuffed, and it would get them off schedule. So, like, as long as they can stay on schedule, then that sets them up in the passing game so that they're not, throwing every time on 2nd and 10, 3rd and 9.
Well, that's why it's always surprising to people that Ohio State has a better yard per carry average than Michigan, because they see all of these negative runs for Ohio State, and it's the 45-yard run that counters that, whereas Michigan is a consistent 5-6 yards. And that's what Dallin Hayden has done very well. I wonder how much of seeing like Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams maybe get yelled at for bouncing stuff out, and Dallin's like, well, the last thing I'm going to do is bounce this thing out.
Yeah, it's like he knows how he's getting on the field, right? Like, this is what he does well. I mean, he's like 190 pounds. Like, he's not going to break through tackles, although he did break some against Maryland. But he is good at like getting skinny, getting through the hole, and getting positive yards. Yeah, I mean, I think the difference, like Michigan, really, I think what makes people think that Ohio State's run game has struggled is really the short yardage issues. And like, to Michigan's credit, like they'll have a similar situation. Like Blake Corum will get that yard because he'll just like stick his head down and get upfield. And so like that's why, like, of all the injuries tomorrow, I mean, maybe putting Jackson Smith and Jigba aside, like Corum's availability is probably the biggest one because like he's just made such a difference to Michigan's run game because like they'll have extra guys in the box and he'll make a miss.
Well, and that injury with Corum, the ability to make guys miss, I wonder how much we'll be able to see of that. Even if he plays, how effective can he be with that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I guess, obviously no inside knowledge. I assume he'll try to play, and I have trouble believing though that he's going to be 100%, and he's not like, he's kind of like Mayan Williams in some ways. I mean, he's not like the fastest, like his 40, is probably not going to run a 4.4, but like, he's just very quick in the hole. He's elusive. People don't get head on shots on him. And so he keeps them again ahead of schedule.
Had a good question here in the chat. How do you scheme up Marvin Harrison to get one-on-ones? Obviously, we talk all about Michigan and everyone else trying to bracket him. They have gotten him one-on-one at times. How do you do that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think like the easiest way in some ways to do it is put Mitch Rossi in the game and like go 12 personnel, because you see most of the time the teams will respond to that is obviously a run heavy tendency from Ohio State. And so they'll tend to play, a single high coverage, right? Cover 1 or cover 3, which either way will tend to get you Harrison singled up on the outside. And so you did see against Maryland, like Ohio State increasingly throwing from 12 personnel with Rossi on the field. Like not only we all know that they get past the 50, they're going to take their shot, right? You all know like the heavy play action, they'll like do a 2-man route, but like you also saw him run mesh, for instance, with like Rossi as the mesher with Harrison. And he's basically like picking off the linebackers. And so they are scheming up ways. And I think the other thing they're trying to do with Harrison is move him around a little bit more. They're not just playing him outside as the X, they'll get him in the slot some more. They'll send Stover sort of like, it'll look like Harrison's the outside guy, but then they'll send Stover in motion so that all of a sudden like the team has to switch coverages. And so they are trying to do that. And then but they do try to take advantage somewhat of, they know that in certain looks, teams are going to bracket Harrison and Ibuka, especially to the same side, to like, we'll take our shot with Julian Fleming one-on-one with no safety help. And so obviously they do need Fleming to make those plays.
I'll punch the next one through.
Go ahead. Here's a question from Carl Zagasser. Ross, why do I feel like Day tries to prove a point sometimes, even at the expense of the offense, i.e. runs into loaded boxes on 3rd and 4th and 1?
Well, so this is like, it's easy to say, right? And then they threw on 4th and 1 against Maryland, didn't get in. Everyone's complaining that why are you throwing on 4th and 1? Like, even football people I talked to are like, what were they doing on that 4th and 1? So, I do think they've been trying to prove a point to some extent. I don't know, why do you try to prove a point? I mean, I think, the charitable answer is like, you want to build a culture in your team. You want your team to build confidence in what you're doing. I will note that when Dallin Hayden was in the game against Maryland, like they converted every 3rd and short, they ran the football. So I do think you also though want to like generate responses from the defense, right? Like I do think on that 4th and 1, when they threw, I think they expected to get cover 0 or, Harrison singled up with no help. They actually didn't get that. He still was open. But so I do think they're probably trying to pick their battles of when they throw in those situations.
Roger Smith wants to know, do you think there might be a plan to not start JSN and slip him in and dial up a play for him with coverage focused on Marvin?
That's I guess the $1 million question, right? Is what's going to happen with Jackson.
Can we get a show of hands? Who's expecting Jackson Smith-Njigba to play 1 snap on Saturday?
There's your answer, Fishbowl.
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, it would be great, right? Like I feel like with Tom, I've been a broken record this year. Like, well, if they had Jackson, it really would make a difference. And like, so it would make a difference, but I don't think you can count on that being available on Saturday.
A much more interesting question in terms of injuries, I think, where there actually is potentially some question to me. Who's starting on the offensive line? I think the tackles, the left guard, the center, right guard. Matt Jones left the Maryland game with a boot on crutches. He's been banged up all year, and that looked like it made it worse. Is it Enoch Vamahi? Do they kick Josh Fryer inside? Do you start Matt Jones? What are you, and I guess maybe more important, how much does that impact what Ohio State can or can't do in short yardage and pass pro? How much does that impact things if either Matt Jones is playing even more compromised or you have a new guy somewhere in the middle of the line? Yeah.
So for my part, I mean, I think you have to hope that Matt Jones can play. I mean, they've just had so much continuity there. And I actually thought Matt Jones, up until that injury, was probably playing the best I'd seen him play in months. I thought he may have been the best Ohio State offensive lineman on Saturday. And I think his PFF grade backed that up too. And, I think the Michigan's defense obviously is statistically been great. Big Ten caveats apply, but that applies to Ohio State's defense too. But the one place, I would not say though that Michigan has like a bunch of high level NFL guys on their defense. The one area where they might though is defensive tackle. And so that's the area that, between Mozzie Smith and Graham coming on. I mean, I do think that there is some danger there for Ohio State with where their guard play has been this year versus their defensive tackles. I guess if Matt Jones couldn't go, I personally would rather see Josh Fryer probably play just based on what he did at tackle. But it's hard to judge how he would be as a guard. But obviously I I have no further inside info as to whether Matt Jones is going to play or not than
Yeah.
anyone else does.
And they'd have to have been playing Fryer all week long because he hasn't really gotten
Yeah.
any snaps at tackle this year. Is Jones the pulling and the stretch that's not really what he can do right now, right? Because of the foot.
I feel like that was a problem. And that's what that's kind of a shame because I actually think he looked healthier against Maryland. And I thought they ran a lot to the right, particularly in the fourth quarter. They ran a lot of stretch to the right. And he and DeJuan Jones and Rossi were doing a really good job with that. And so, yeah, but that is the concern is if he can't move the way they need him to, then, you might have to go a different direction.
And you can't bring in, well, this is our polling guy.
No,
This is our stretch guy. You don't want to telegraph it that way.
On the other side of the ball, question from Dave Larman. Hope we use 4-2-5 and let our defensive ends run wild behind the line, JT and Jack. This is kind of one of those interesting games where you could see Ohio State go to more of a 3 linebacker look, or do you stick with Tanner McAllister? Maybe do you play more Josh Proctor instead of Lathan Ransom? How do you see them lining up on defense with Michigan being a little more run heavy?
Yeah, so I definitely wouldn't take Ransom off the field. I would, as much as possible, you want JT and Zach Harrison on the field. I mean, I think that there's a noticeable drop off in terms of like the 4-2-5 versus bringing a third linebacker. I think you just have to be really adjust to what Michigan's doing, because Michigan will happily they'll run 11 personnel and they'll threaten you with a bubble screen to one side and run it the opposite way. But then the next play they'll go 13 and bring in 3 tight ends and they'll run power. So you just have to be able to adjust. And it's been interesting this year is when they play teams like in Iowa, let's say, or Wisconsin, or even Penn State, Knowles sometimes just changes it up for the sake of changing it up. I think just to put it on the opposing offense to block different looks correctly, whether it's a 4-3 or the 3-3-5 with the jack. I do think we'll see some jack tomorrow. Michigan hasn't been as big of a counter team as they were last year, but they're increasingly running more power. And the design, Knowles, used that jack a lot, particularly at Oklahoma State against Oklahoma, because Lincoln Riley loves to run counter. And so you mug that guy up by put him over the guard and he just follows the pullers. And so that way, then your linebackers don't have to adjust as much to gaps changing. So I do think we'll see that. And, lately they've been doing that with Sawyer as the jack, and they still keep JT and Harrison as the end. So it gets all 3 of them on the field.
And Knowles has said that position that was formulated as a run disruptor.
Yeah.
And so this would be one of those games where you're going to have to disrupt the run, regardless of who's running it. So that would be, I would agree with that. So is that that's a 5-5-2?
Yeah. What we even saw against Notre Dame too, is they Knowles changed it up such that by using the jack, he essentially created a bear front.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get basically 5 guys. And, Illinois had a lot of success against Michigan, basically playing a 5-1, a 5-2, or even getting 6 guys on the line. Because again, you're cutting down the double teams that Michigan likes to establish to get to the second level. So, I think that Ohio State, if anything, has been a little bit more vanilla up front in what Knowles has done the last couple of weeks. And I would expect that to change tomorrow.
You mentioned there's some of the stuff that Jim Knowles is doing, just to sort of mix things up and change things schematically. Nicholas Marconi asks, what sort of scheme and tendency packages might be deliberately emphasized this game that weren't all year? What are you expecting?
Yeah, so that's one example is creating sort of a 5-man front. I think that they will change gaps up more. I think lots of run blitzing, 5-man pressures to purposely again, you're creating confusion for the offensive line. That was one of their problems against Michigan last year, is Michigan knew exactly where they were going to be lined up pre-snap and post-snap. And so you're changing gaps, you're using line, you'll, for instance, he likes to blitz one at the A gap and let the other guy loop around. Things that will just throw off the blocking, throw off double teams. And then, I would expect, I think the hope is probably, the other thing I would look for is I think Ohio State needs to get up and press more than they have. They've been playing a lot of man coverage, but they've been playing a lot of off man coverage. I think we can all think of examples from that Maryland game, that 3rd and 8th throw where Denzel Burke's 15 yards off. And JJ McCarthy in Michigan's passing game has been very much underneath driven. He's happy to throw short stick routes to the tight end or underneath stuff to Ronnie Bell. And I think you have to force them to try to show that they can throw the ball vertically, even if it puts you, and potentially a position to give that up.
Mark, I want to ask you if Ryan Day's decision to select Kyle McCord over JJ McCarthy, if we're seeing why, like with the lack of touch from JJ McCarthy, why Kyle McCord over JJ McCarthy, do you think?
I think at the time, so much of it was Kyle's build. He's a much broader, stout. They like the big prototype, and JJ is not short, but he's also kind of more of a slender build. They were still at that point, they were still running the quarterback a little bit, but obviously that's kind of went away a little bit. But so that was part of it. They loved Kyle's demeanor. He is very steady. He's very, very steady. And I think they really liked that about Kyle. Obviously there's the connection there with him and Marvin playing at the same school. So it's like, okay, if you disrupt one of those kids, you want to keep both of those guys happy because you want to get both of them. So that obviously plays into St. Joseph's great program.
Yeah.
But I just think, again, I think Kyle has the more prototype quarterback, NFL quarterback build. And I think they liked his demeanor, and again, he won 3 state championships. So he's a winner.
It's interesting how Marvin Harrison is becoming the Mike Conley to Kyle McCord's like great. It's like, here's this throw in. He's just, he's the best.
Interesting question from Troy V here. Here in the year of the tight end, do we think you're just seeing another big game from Stover, or do you think they're going to keep the tight end in for extra blocking? We saw Ohio State have trouble with Michigan's pass rush last year. Ohio State's pass pro this year has been pretty good. Do you think you're going to see more Cade Stover in pass pro or pass routes?
I mean, I think you'll see some of both, right? Because just by the nature of what they do, they like taking their shots where they max protect and throw a 2-man route. But I do think that you will see Stover emphasized in the passing game. I think Michigan's linebackers have had some issues with play action. Junior Colson in particular, like he's athletic, but like he can get himself out of position. And I just think that when Ohio State's offense has been firing all cylinders this year, they kind of get the ball rolling by like a delay route to Stover or like a drag route or throwback. And I feel like he brings a lot of energy to the entire team, and they sort of start feeding off of that, and they get the ball rolling downhill. So I would see him being a big part of the plan tomorrow.
Junior Colson left the game last week with an injury. There's some concern that he may or may not go. When I tell you that Junior Colson was only in on 2 tackles of Chase Brown against Illinois, what do you think?
That's not a good sign for Michigan. And Michigan is so thin at linebacker anyways. I mean, they've moved Michael Barrett there, who in the Don Brown year was their Viper, aka their nickel. And he's like, he plays well. He's a good blitzer, but that is an area where I don't think, I think Michigan's much better up front at the defensive line than they are at the second level linebacker.
Jimmy Rolder is their backup middle linebacker. Former
last
minute target.
Yeah. And he's had some struggles, at least just, reading the Michigan partisan analyses is, he's a freshman. So,
yeah. Would you want Gabe Powers or CJ Hicks in this game?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
The Michigan beat, according to Taeyun, Michigan beat indicates Corum 100% playing along with Edwards. 100% playing does not mean playing at 100%, but how much does a Blake Corum at 75% or 85% or Donovan Edwards at 85 or 90%, whatever, how much does that impact what if you're formulating a score prediction, how much does Blake Corum at 80% or 85% move the needle for you? Or is that just kind of Blake Corum at 80% is kind of CJ Stokes at 100%?
I mean, I think but even CJ Stokes 100% would move the needle for me, right? Because to me, I think if anything, Corum's probably been underrated this year. Like, I think he's been the best running back in college football. And so, I think he's been just such a driver of their success that it moves the needle for me. I mean, with Edwards, the interesting thing is if he does have a broken hand, what I find him as a threat is really as a receiver. I think he has been a drop off from Corum as a runner, but he's obviously a threat out of the backfield. The one game they moved him out wide and basically threw a fade to him. And so, I guess you have to see it in action, but having a broken hand can generally obviously impact what you can do as a receiver.
Yeah, and he had the game last year of 12 catches or whatever, 170 yards, 10 for 170
against Maryland,
like
right?
Yeah. And as you said, they'll throw to him, they'll line him up out wide, and he is almost their best contested ball catcher. And they're they're not very good at it with everybody else though. So,
So Matt Johnson, who I believe is a Michigan fan, says as long as Corum can rumble for 5 to 6 yards every play, doesn't really matter whether he can cut back. And I think 100% Blake Corum and 100% Michigan offensive line, you could see the Blake Corum runs for 4, 5, 6 yards a carry and is pushing. They're just they're cutting down Ohio State's possessions. It's not a 14 possession game for Ohio State. It's a 10 possession game. That feels like that's the path to victory. If Blake Corum's not 100%, can Blake Corum run for 4, 5, 6 yards a carry, or does that turn into 2, 3, 4 yards a carry, and then you're off schedule, and then how big of a difference does that make in terms of his effectiveness?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would think it would impact him. A lot of this sort of, I think I said mythology, or there's a lot of memories about the game last year that I'm not sure how much they line up. To me, it wasn't that Michigan lined up and ran inside zone 50 times and created double teams and just drove it down the field. Michigan gashed Ohio State by running pin and pull to the boundary while faking an RPO to the other side. And Ohio State was just outnumbered. And then the defensive ends would fly up the field and just create these huge holes. So none of that's to undersell Michigan's run game. Michigan's offensive line is very good. Keegan coming back is a big deal for Michigan. He's very good at guard. I have trouble believing that that just how I've seen Jim Knowles react. If Michigan's getting 4 or 5 yards running, he's going to do something to try to disrupt that. He'll generally try to solve his problems with aggression. So he'll get more and more nosy. He'll go cover 0. He'll blitz Ransom off the edge. He'll blitz Eichenberg. He will look for ways to basically muddy up, because Ohio State's goal at all times is going to be let's put Michigan in 3rd and 8, right? And it's just and that's sort of a cliched analysis that rings true in this game.
I want to jump in too, because it's not like Corum is shooting to be at 100%. I mean, at this point of the year, they need Corum at 75%. It's going to be the 100%. And okay, maybe he can't cut back, but a lot of his running is leg drive. And if he's got any sort of lower body injury, you have to wonder what that's going to be able to mean for that leg drive. So if he's turning those, he usually turns 2, 3 yard runs into 5, 6 yard runs. If he can't do that in 2, 3 yard runs or 2, 3 yard runs, then exactly you're getting off schedule.
Yeah, that third and 8. That's why I keep saying first down is almost as important as third down. And you see those run blitzes and make it a 2nd and 12. And then what does Michigan do? Well, you don't want to throw twice with JJ McCarthy, so you run once, and then you get your 4 yards, and now you're 3rd and 8, and then they still run.
Well, and one of the things that makes the Michigan offense go and so effective is when it's 3rd and 5, they're perfectly fine running with Corum, because if he picks up 3 yards or 4 yards on 3rd down, they're perfectly fine with running Corum on 4th and 2, 4th and 1, because they know he's going to get it. If you're suddenly not quite so sure you're going to get it, that sort of changes the calculus there. And then all of a sudden possessions that would have been extended, suddenly you're not getting extended.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen Michigan frustrate teams so many times this year. It's 3rd and 7, and they're expecting pass, and they run it for 6 or 7 yards. And it's so, I fully expect to see some of those moments. We saw Michigan turn to the screen game some last week. I expect that, and I'm sure they will definitely turn on the read game with McCarthy. Now, I can't say that I've seen him be great at reading, but I think that it'll be all hands on deck.
We're going to ignore the hateful question on the screen right now and move on to John Alexander.
No, I'm going to leave it up there.
Who says, knowing the importance of this game, do you think Ohio State's defense will come up with a lot of blitz packages to rattle McCarthy? What would you do, Ross? If Ohio State's ahead 14-6 in the second quarter, and Michigan, you kind of know, okay, or it's 14-3, okay, they have to score. You can't just sit back and kind of lean on the run. Do you sit back and just try and keep everything in front of you and try and make JJ McCarthy beat you with accuracy, or do you try and pressure him and rattle him and with extra pressure?
I think you need to do a little bit of both. I mean, I think you'll see some drop 8. I think you will see him then pick blitzes. Obviously what you don't want to do though is rush out of control and let him scramble upfield. I think I noted earlier this week, you want to try to force him to scramble left. He's not really he hasn't shown that he's really comfortable once he's scrambling left, turning at his shoulders and throwing. And so you want to kind of controlled rush him. Knowles used a cover 0 blitz against Maryland last week, where both defensive tackles showed that they were coming and then backed off to sort of contain. So you have to keep some contain on him, because I think that there's times where like he's going to want to look to run as opposed to try to go through his third or fourth progression.
Shouldn't he? I mean,
Yeah.
when your third and fourth progression are receivers who may or may not catch them, not likely to get open,
Yeah.
like 2 reads and go type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, and I've seen, I personally think like he will force the football to one of Schematic, Loveland, or Ronnie Bell. Like he's, I doesn't seem like I do think Ronan Wilson's a good player in space, kind of, small, but I agree. I mean, I don't think doesn't seem like there's a lot of confidence there in terms of going to some of those other receivers.
Especially last week, you throw it right into Andrell Anthony's hands and he drops it. Like it's the best throw he's made all year, and it doesn't get caught. I do think if you make him roll left and he throws back across his body, you're asking him to throw interceptions at that point. You're inviting it.
Yeah.
Give us one thing that if Ohio State fans see this, it is probably a tremendously good sign. Like other than, hey, they scored touchdowns in the first 7 possessions. Like
shoot, you took my answer.
Give us a schematic thing that, or a boy, Ohio State's running for, X number of yards per carry in the first couple drives, or, and then give us something that is, boy, if you see this, you should be a little bit concerned as an Ohio State fan.
Yeah. I mean, I think that if, to just take the run game on both sides, like I do think if Corum comes out and they're gaining like 4 or 5 yards, like every run and staying ahead of the chains, then that's obviously a little concerning. Conversely, if they come out and stuff Ohio State running the football, that's obviously a little concerning. I mean, as an Ohio State fan, I think you'd love to see like a great drive where they seem, like one step ahead of Michigan and Stroud looks dialed in, and they get Harrison going and Ibuka going right away, and Stover. And so I think that, but I think up front, what you don't want to see is like Michigan really able to control the football and to the point of like, they're going to have 9 possessions down this game because they're huddling and they're going to be able to keep gaining first downs.
Were there 31 possessions? How many possessions were there in that Maryland game?
It was a bunch, more than they're probably going to be on Saturday. And the interesting thing is, Ohio State coming out really hot. They came out great against Maryland. They went right downfield, bing, bang, boom. And it was like, all right, we are like 2 drives away from being able to say it's Michigan week. And then,
but in that
game,
there's reason to take your foot off the gas in that game. There's no reason in this game to do that.
Does Ryan Day take his, I'm not expecting Ohio State to win this game by 4 touchdowns. But if Ohio State's up by 3-4 touchdowns,
hater,
does Ryan Day take his foot off the gas, or does Ryan Day, want to make sure he gets home from third base? To use a baseball analogy.
I think he will hang as many as he can.
Yeah.
Not even necessarily because of what happened last year, but I think everyone knows if Ohio State kicks a game-winning field goal in the final seconds to beat Michigan, there's a very good chance Michigan's still in the playoff at this point.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're talking not only beat them, but knock them out of the playoffs as well.
I think don't even give the committee
wow, that's diabolical.
Make the committee sit there and say, wow, these guys just lost by 5 touchdowns 10 days ago, or we can't put them in the playoffs.
That's amazing. Actually, I hadn't thought about that. Just beat them so bad that they have to go to the Rose Bowl, I guess.
Yeah.
Just kind of zipping through some questions here. Kate Tayun says Keys, number 1, use of Stover as a receiver 4 or 5 times, run north-south with whoever is healthy, get ahead by 2 scores early before Michigan gets going. I mean, if they're able to run north-south, that feels like that's the thing that would, if you're picking up 5 yards and staying on schedule, that feels like the best way for them to ensure that they are ahead by a couple scores. I mean, if Ohio State can't run the ball, Ohio State finishes with 2.7 yards per carry on Saturday. Can Ohio State win? And how, or does that involve, and then a miracle happen? Like they block a punt and they run back a pick six. Like, can they win with essentially just throwing the ball if that's how they have to win?
I think they could win. It obviously ups the difficulty, right? So like with Stroud, like what you want to do, and you've seen teams try, is like you basically kind of just throw the kitchen sink of coverages just to like try to create some hesitation in him. Cause like when he reads the safeties correctly and like knows which side he's going and like confidently throws it, he's great. So like, I'm sure Michigan would love to be able to sit and, like cover 2 and cover 4 and make him sort of dissect. I mean, that's what they did last year, basically, at least when Ohio State was in pass tendency formations. You know, they wanted to bracket outside or Jackson Smith and Jigma inside. And so if Ohio State can run the football, it does. I do agree with Ryan Day that like Ohio State's been better this year when they can run the football and like be more balanced, because they don't quite have the same, you know, level of play outside. I mean, it's a high bar to clear as they did last year, right? Especially with Jackson hurt. I mean, I think Fleming is like, if you get in the ball quickly and he's big and fast, he can run, or like he can beat a single coverage to the post, but he's not bringing, he's not Chris Olave at Z. So I do think that they will be helped if they can get sort of a run game going. I think get Stover involved early and not try to basically do what they had to do last year, which was pass their way out of it.
Last year, Ohio State rushed for 2.1 yards per carry, and as a one-score game in the fourth quarter. Michigan averaged 7.2 yards per carry. I think Ohio State's number is going to go up. Michigan's number is going to go down. And so I've been saying I think Ohio State can be outrushed in this and still win, because I think that the defense is going to be, the Ohio State defense is not going to give up 7.2 yards per carry. Illinois gave up 4.2 yards per carry. Like Penn State did give up 7.6 yards per carry against Michigan. That was like criminal negligent defense on Penn State's part. I'm not expecting that this week.
No.
So I think Ohio State can be outrushed and still win by 7 or 10.
Well, and there was I found a stat earlier in the week that I'm just now trying to pull up quickly, but I think the only team to run for more than 4 yards per carry against Ohio State this year is Wisconsin, and that was skewed by that late 75 yard. I mean, really, and yes, let's just stipulate this is the best rushing attack that Ohio State will have faced all season. Okay, we're getting that out of the way. If Michigan's even at 4 yards per carry, 4.5 yards per carry, you know, that's okay. And maybe you're staying on schedule ish sometimes. Enough, is that enough? I mean, if Michigan can run for 4.5 yards a carry, is that enough? Or is that, you know, boy, then they need to make some special teams defensive plays to win.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the latter, or they need more of the passing game. I mean, I think, you know, Penn State, you can kind of, if you're Michigan, like you can see like Penn State had some success rushing the football against Ohio State. You know, there were some things that worked. On the flip side, like their yards per attempt was not, as you said, like not all that great. And like really Penn State was primarily able to move the football by creating explosive plays in the pass game. And so I do think you have to marry it together. I do not expect a replay of last year. I mean, that just because like, you know, Jim Knowles is competent. So, so like at the end of the day, I do think they're gonna have to get something out of the passing game on the Michigan side, or turnovers obviously would be a big one.
All right, we have a super chat we got to get to from Silver Bullet, an extremely generous super chat. Thank you. I tuned in, did not expect to see an episode of The Bachelor. Thanks for doing this. And what a crew. Why is Kevin wearing blue? Well, he didn't have anything to wear. I was like, here, borrow this, buddy. It'll be fine. No one will comment, I'm sure.
It's not Eddie Bauer.
And it's
from
California and still didn't work.
It's purple, as I said, like Barney or Grimace.
But the undershirt is blue.
But that's Skyline. I mean that's a Skyline shirt. So
I have two of those.
I wouldn't admit that.
Yeah. You say it's a Michigan shirt.
Yeah,
You say it's Chargers.
You
It's the
think you're
Rams.
helping, but you're
oh,
not.
no, well, I'm gonna sit there and I'll have some Skyline, and then I'll sit
Dig it a
next to
little-
Tony and press row tomorrow and make them suffer.
Love it.
So how much longer are you able to hang out? Or you...
I have not heard from them,
Okay,
so let me
well,
check. So
No, don't ask. Don't ask. Stick around as long as you want to. I did want to Ross will have to duck out at some point. And yes, this is a little like The Bachelor, but this is, you know, it's Ohio State, Michigan.
This is kind of a sad Bachelor.
Well, ladies, this is The Bachelor where no one's hoping to get the rose.
Yeah.
Like, the rose means you lost and you're not going to the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
So I did want to get your thoughts on, you know, how you see the game shaking out. Like we all turned in our score predictions. This was a game that I have sort of wrestled with more than just about any over the last couple of years. Normally it's like, will Ohio State beat Rutgers by 40 or will it be 50? Tune in to find out. This is one where, like, I can absolutely see paths and scenarios where Michigan can win this game. I think that involves keeping Ohio State under 30. But how do you see this game shaping out?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think it was like 33-22. I mean, I personally see like Ohio. I mean, it could go any which way. I mean, in some ways, you hope that like the one worry actually I have is that like Ohio State has built this up so much that they come out tight, right? And it's like a little bit overhyped. And it takes a little bit of time to settle down and get into the game. Because I do think it helps Ohio State if they can get out front and play with the lead.
Where do your score predictions come from every week?
Where do mine come from?
Because they're never even remotely possible.
That's the point. It's the principle of the thing.
Is it like a shtick thing? At this
It
point?
is a shtick thing. It's a shtick that I'm glad someone's picking up on.
I'm like, because
I think the process of picking games is absurd at some level, and like I know people love to do it, and like, but I'm like, how am I going to pick what the score is?
33, they're going to kick 11 field goals.
I think I said 34. In fact, this week I think I actually said 34-21 maybe because I was trying not to do shtick for this game. So I was, although I do think I don't think Michigan's going to score. It's hard, right? I don't think Michigan, their red zone offense has not been that great. I cannot imagine actually that they score every time they get in the red zone and touchdowns when they get in the red zone. And so, I do think that's a key for Ohio State, obviously, is to convert, field goals into touchdowns.
I think Michigan is like 57% touchdown in the red zone, which is like, I think 10th in the Big Ten I saw today. So not ideal.
No. And obviously they have a great field goal kicker. Ohio State has a good field goal kicker. So, Ohio State, like against Maryland, that was part of the issue. They were getting in the scoring in the red zone. Ohio State had to kick 3 field goals or whatever. So
last week was the first time since the 2018 Ohio State-Michigan game that both teams in an Ohio State game kicked at least 2 field goals, which is that seems impossible to believe. But according to the Ohio State stats, that is true. I did not go and rewatch every game since the 2018 Michigan game, but that is how that played out. I think that might happen again this week. And the close game, the really close game or the Michigan win feels like it's a 27-23 game where one team's kicking 2 field goals and one team's kicking 3 field goals. And it's just, if Ohio State's scoring touchdowns, I don't think what's the highest, barring the -5 in turnovers kind of game or the kick return for a touchdown kind of thing. What is the highest number of points you see Michigan's offense scoring? Do you see Michigan's offense breaking 30, 35? What is the best case scenario Michigan offensive day?
To me, it'd probably be that. I mean, that would involve some combination of JJ McCarthy, finally hitting a couple balls downfield, a combination of him running, him running for 100+ yards, and them just being very efficient on the ground. And I guess at some level, I think I have a good feel for Michigan's run game. The defense is almost a little harder to suss out because as I was saying, on the one hand, they're statistically great. I think they're 4th in SP plus. Again, no one jumps out and really scares you though. And I mean, I guess you could, so some of the things we say about Ohio State's defense apply too, but collectively they've played very well. But then it's well, what do you even compare it to? I mean, Ohio State can get a little clunky on offense at times. And I guess that's Michigan's best case scenario is they force a couple, I don't know, Ohio State fair catches a kickoff and maybe comes out and gets a delay of game. And then, it's gets on schedule and all of a sudden you've got 2 3-and-out punts and you're getting, but things
when would that happen?
I don't know. Or a delay a game on a 2-point attempt. No.
We did it, Tom and I did a tail of the tape of position by position Ohio State, Michigan. And now as you're talking, I'm thinking, how many guys on the Michigan defense start for Ohio State? Mozzie Smith? And is that it?
Yeah, I mean, Mike Morris is obviously really good. I mean, probably the corners. I don't know. The Michigan corners are a weird situation too, because I don't think either of them, I don't know. Are they better than
I think they're all the same.
Brandon Burke? Yeah.
You throw them all in a bucket and you can just pull 2 out and put them here and 2 out here. And
yeah.
Will they be good on that particular throw? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe. Are they open? The receivers like, and we've seen DJ Turner, Michigan corner, chase a lot. Like he can give
Yeah.
up some plays. I think if you see CJ Stroud and Marvin Harrison connecting on those, forget about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think like, you know, I think Stroud was a little off last week, which caused just like just a little bit more inefficient than normal. Like, you know, he missed Harrison on a couple. I didn't think he was quite as quick in his reads as sometimes progressions, and sometimes I've seen him. And so obviously, like, you know, easy to say that like CJ Stroud has to play really well, but it does matter. Like he is as good as he is. Like some games are better than others, like anyone else. And so, you know, I thought one really good sign for Ohio State was how well Ibuka played last week and how many tough catches he had, because they do need him like to be that second guy, and
especially out of the slot there.
Yeah.
Where Michigan has had trouble. Ohio State has made use of that against Michigan over the years, and that's, you know, Don Brown's defense and what have you. But I think Emeka is going to have a pretty big day based on what they're going to do with Marvin and then separating Emeka like away from that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know that like Michigan fans have been like super high on Mike Sanistril this year, but like I did think he had some issues against Illinois and they kind of went after him a little bit, and he's small. So also in the run game, like they try to keep him out of the fits, but like, you know, that's why I do think the run game is going to be important, because like, is Michigan going to try to play Ohio State with basically 6 guys in the box or 7 with a plain cover 3?
Because I mean, he's one of their best defenders, so
Yeah.
you don't necessarily want to take him off the field, but if you're going to keep him on there, run the ball.
Yeah.
Buckeye Joe wants to know, are we expecting Day to run tempo or continue with the typical lineup and look to the sideline for plays since the clock is ticking down to 5 seconds? I mean, you've seen tempo work against Michigan at times this year. Is that something Ohio State doesn't run that as much as you might expect? So is that something you think you see more of tomorrow?
I do. Yeah. I mean, you got to get yourself going, right? Like I am not a fan of tempo. Like when you come out of like, you got to get the first down and get going. And like, you know, we have seen tempo bite them sometimes when they try to do it like 3rd and 1. And it's like the automatic response from the defense is like blitz off the edge against that and like get stuff in the backfield. So it's like not the perfect panacea, but I do think that they will try to use tempo. You know, I think Michigan's been a little bit better against it this year. As I said, like what I would like to see them try to do is like see if they can get Michigan to come out and play that 3-4 or 5-2, whatever you want to call it, against Ohio State's 12 personnel. Like Georgia killed them last year doing that, because like they put 2 tight ends on the field there and like it was wide open. And so like obviously like Ohio State doesn't have Brock Bowers, but even if you can get that, you're going to get some soft coverage on the back end, and like then you can really attack with Harrison.
They've got Farmer Brock Bowers.
Super chat from Buckeye Joe. Ross, I think their front 7 is good, and we'll try to do what Penn State and Iowa did, stop the run, which will keep the game very close. Do you see that as the key for Michigan's defense?
I do. I mean, I guess I'm just going to go off of how most teams have played Ohio State in the back end of the season. Like, and again, as we've discussed, like Iowa, I can use as a good example, like totally changed their game plan, right? Like they're a team that loves to sit in 2 high, except against Ohio State, they got super aggressive. And I'm guessing their thought process was like, we got to take something away. And like, so if we have a better chance against the pass game, if we force them behind the sticks, you know, Penn State, I chalk some of that up to running back play, to be frank. And like some of the same issues we talked about. But yes, I do think, I mean, my guess is that Michigan tries to take a page from what they did last year, which is like, hey, if Ohio State's in the pistol, we're going to like spin down and play like cover 3. If Ohio State's in shotgun with, you know, 4 wide, we're going to play, you know, cover 4 bracket. And so I do think Ohio State's going to be like, they do need to be a bit of step ahead this year in terms of like, and they have been better about it. Like pistol, we're going to throw, you know, we're going to run from 4 wide and things like that.
Eric wants to know, what game day coverage is everyone watching, Big Noon or Game Day, or do you go back and forth? And friends, I have great news.
Yeah, it's good.
If you like watching this, boy howdy, do I have the pregame show for you on Saturday morning. The plan is for us to start at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle around 7:30 in the morning. Normally we start at like 9. We're going to start early and we'll go for a while. And you can find that all at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. So just go ahead and set a reminder in your phone, or set an alarm for Saturday morning for 7:30 in the morning. Join us. We'll be live on campus for all of that and have our usual full pregame show talking about all this stuff. And no Pat McAfee. That is my personal guarantee. So you are welcome there. Next one from Troy V. I've seen a lot of Illinois wide receivers open in that game against Michigan last week, not sold on their secondary. Did you watch much of the Michigan-Illinois game?
I did.
And it felt like there were a couple times where there were people running wide open, and Tommy DeVito is not a CJ Stroud. Italian CJ Stroud. How about that?
I thought that Illinois had a good game plan. I mean, I thought Michigan came out and they were playing a bunch of cover one, and like Illinois just did what I said. They got Michigan like in their 3-4, and they threw them out of it. I mean, I thought Michigan by the end was playing a bunch of like cover 4 and cover 2, and then all of a sudden like they were down a guy on the line of scrimmage for the first time all season, and then like Chase Brown. Michigan hasn't been great. Like it's a whole nother issue. Michigan hasn't been great fitting like gap runs, counter powered, and Illinois used a ton of it against them. So my usual call for Ohio State to run power and counter trade more consistently. But yes, I think that I just don't think they've been tested that much, right? Like we saw the guy from Michigan State all of a sudden like turn into Superman the one game for a couple series, and like I thought Illinois had a good game plan, but I mean I tend to think that that they're gonna have to show it. I mean the Big Ten has not exactly had a premium of passing quarterbacks this season.
What are you basing that on? See, when you watch the game as closely as Ross does, with as learned an eye as Ross does, you might
see these great insights you can pick up.
Yeah. When like 8 of the 10 top defenses are from the Big Ten, it's because 8 of the worst 10 offenses are also from the Big Ten.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, Michigan, partisans are saying, well, they were just putting, they're practicing their too high stuff for Ohio State, which gets into like, well, if you're going to do that, why would you put it all on film the week before? And like, what, why not save it? Or maybe you're trying to get Ohio State to think that you're going to do a bunch of that and not, but
that's wishery.
Yeah.
Everybody believes that the long con is going on,
Yeah.
that it's like, well, they didn't want to put anything out there. So they're going to roll the dice and potentially lose a game along the way just so they can beat the rival.
And keep Blake Corum on the sideline while you're losing a game, and like, the idea that you're gonna not try to win a game because next week's actually the important game, because we can still lose this one and win next week and win the Big Ten. Like I don't think that was in play at all last week.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Ohio State didn't have like a great defensive game plan. I thought that fit what Maryland did, but I don't think it was like gamesmanship so much as like, hey, this is like who we are, and like we're not going to change it for one game when we have Michigan the next week, and that's what we're going to need to do anyways. And so I think it was more just like I think that Michigan had some holes in the secondary that they were looking to patch up, and then Illinois sort of got the ball rolling, no pun intended, and took advantage of it.
David wants to know, who do you think gets the majority of the snaps on the defensive line for Ohio State, presumably to stop the run game?
Harrison, JT, Teron Vincent, I guess Ty Hamilton. The Mike Hall situation is like such a mystery to me. Obviously there's something there.
Well, Knowles said he's been dealing with something for weeks now. Just going through an injury. We saw him, he only played like the 7 or 8 snaps against Michigan State. Then he came back for like 20 and 30 snaps the next 2 games, and now he's back down under 20 for like the last 3. So
yeah, but I mean, I think Hamilton's pretty good against the run. But really, to me, it's like the big thing is like keep Harrison and JT on the field, unless you can carry them off at the end, I guess.
Whenever you see the Ohio State giving up a drive, you kind of know who is in on the defensive line. Am I wrong?
No, I mean,
out.
Yeah.
I mean, they have to their credit, like they've cut it down more and more and more as the season went on. But like, yeah, when they were up like 27-13, and like, you look in the backup center defensive end, and you get your backup nickel safety in, and like you back up, it's like, oh, here we go.
Yeah, and it was bizarre to see Cam Martinez out there, and at that point you're like, is Tanner McAllister hurt?
Like,
is he on a bike? Is he in the tent? Like, I don't know why you take Tanner McAllister out there.
Yeah,
like I understand the defensive ends and defensive line, they do that all the time. Doing it with McAllister and Martinez kind of caught me off guard.
Yeah, I mean, I just like can't the back 7. I would just not rotate. Like the corner situation opposite Cam Brown, I think last week was a little bit like, who's going to do what we want you to do out here? And like, it was like sort of like they get frustrated at Denzel Burke and they pull him, and then they'll find someone they can put in until like he's had his sufficient punishment. And I think like
go stand in a corner.
Yeah, literally. I think it's like, oh, you're gonna. Yeah, it's like I think this game you just pretty much have to roll with Denzel Burke and hope that he comes to play.
Matt says Michigan had a lot of injuries last week as well. Offensive line, tight end, running back, defensive end. And that's all true. I mean, Morris didn't play last week. I would expect him to play this week.
Yeah, he didn't play last week, so he could play this week.
Yeah. And, Corum and Edwards, we've talked about a bunch, and it's, probably we're expecting them to play, but are they, how close to 100% are they?
Luke Schoonmaker.
Eric All being out and Schoonmaker being out last week, that really dings into their passing offense quite a bit. I'm expecting him back, right? I mean, I think you're getting everyone
all hands on deck.
Yeah, I think it's as all hands on deck as it can be, and then it's just a matter of how healthy are those hands.
Or the feet, perhaps. Or the ankles or the knee.
Yeah.
Buckeye, do you need to dip out?
I'm going to dip out, but I'll take one more.
All right. Last one from Buckeye Joe. I'm hoping we see play action from under center. I mean, you sort of track this stuff in terms of formations and tendencies. They've been so run heavy under center. We just kind of scoffed at the notion that this is all one big long con, but in this case.
Yeah. They've done some. I mean, they did some again last week. I mean, you don't have to do it all the time, right? You're not going to throw 50-50. I mean, I would like to see them. It'd be great from under center, especially like if you're in short yardage, that like you could do like some quick game stuff to Harrison from under center or like sprint out. Because like if like a team comes on cover zero, there should be like literally take one step and just throw it out to him and like he'll get a yard against a corner because they'll be off coverage enough. But like I think they've been pretty good since. Like what game was that? Penn State, I guess, where they ran it like 4 or 5 of 5 times from pistol. Like I do think they've made a concerted effort to throw from under center and in pistol. Although it's mostly like heavy play action looks.
All right. Well,
all right, friends.
Thank you to Ross for joining us. A genuine pleasure to finally get to do this in person.
That's right.
And if you were bummed and you're thinking, I just turned in, what happened? I'm going to take the Ross segment of this, and that will be the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning podcast for Saturday morning, because I was going to have Ross on the show anyway, and it's like, well, we just had Ross here, so we'll chop a little piece of this out, and we'll have
pretty lazy, if you ask me.
The people want Ross. What can I tell you?
Oh well, that's
but yeah, so we'll have that on the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning podcast. So it'll be a late Friday afternoon, early Friday evening, so you can find that there. So Ross, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
All right.
Enjoy.
Yes, exactly. Hopefully in person.
Oh, I'm so glad he's gone.
God, it smells. All right, guys. Thank you.
Yep.
Great to see everyone.
All right.
All right, Kevin is going to fix the camera shot by removing all of us from it.
Texas 17, Baylor 12.
Yeah, Baylor's controlling the time of possession, so I don't know how Texas can possibly be winning.
Well, they had a short field. They had a short field on one. Shank punt. And then, Ewers had an intentional grounding in his own end zone. So that's the 12.
That's why you should never punt.
That's my bit. All right. So this is also, in addition to being a big football game, this is also a big recruiting weekend. So Mark is here. Mark is one of our recruiting analysts. He and Alex Kleitman have been tracking this stuff all week in terms of visitors and who, we're what, like 3.5 weeks away from early signing day, something like that. I mean, we're getting into the home stretch of 2023 recruiting. The list of people who are visiting is it's like the phone book. So Navin R. Johnson, 2025 wide receiver, big visit. Very excited to be on that list.
Plumbing.
Yes. But give us like a couple names that are significant people who are either people who we're looking at as, potential potential booms, people who are, hey, this is a big deal to get this guy on campus or get this guy on campus again. Give us just a couple names like that.
Yeah, I think, first you want to start with Damon Wilson. That's kind of the elephant in the room. 5-star defensive end.
Don't say that if Alabama is involved.
Alabama's a distant third right now on that one. But that's been back and forth with Georgia the past several months. And it's kind of funny every time he visits one of the two schools, or every time the coaches go to his school or whatever, it's, they're feeling, that school's feeling really good. If it happens soon, it's going to be for them. And, so that was the whole thing coming out of his last Georgia visit when he watched Georgia kind of dismantle Tennessee. It was, if he announces soon, it's going to be Georgia. He didn't. And he's got this visit now. And so I'll just cut right to it on Monday. Everyone is going to be saying, "Oh, if he announces soon, it's going to be Ohio State." So just wait for that. That's coming. But I have liked Ohio State's position for a couple months now, and obviously good to get him back on campus. And I think this will be a positive trip. He's been around campus. He doesn't need to do the whole 3 or 4 day thing.
Right.
Now he gets to just go see kind of a great atmosphere, a great game. It's supposed to be about 50, so that's nice for the Florida kid.
Yeah, it's like this all the time. in
Yeah,
November.
they can show him how it was just 70 degrees like a week ago. Yeah, I can show him all that. But good sign to get him back. And I don't know. I'm expecting that one to probably go to in-home visits at this point, which I think can start December 2nd. I think they've shuffled it this year, but I think it's December 2nd. They can start the in-homes. But I think that's probably where this one's going.
But who has the last in-home visit? I'm sorry, who?
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that'll be the thing for 2 weeks. It'll be Larry Johnson just left the house. If he announces soon it's Ohio State, or Kirby Smart just left.
First is worst. I mean, best. I don't know.
Yeah.
So is this the last weekend that players can visit places? Like,
No, so they can take official visits the next, I think, 3 weekends.
but he's already
Definitely
been
the
to
next
Georgia.
two. He's made his officials
Yeah.
to Ohio State and Georgia. This is an unofficial return
Right.
visit. So they can have guys back for unofficials. They can have guys, probably a couple we're going to talk about here soon. They can have guys in for officials here the next couple of weeks. Obviously, if Ohio State wins, they're not going to be able to host official visitors next weekend. So they would have to either punt that down to one of the following 2 weekends, or you could always arrange something midweek, which is a little more feasible for the schools once the season's over, but not so much always for the player.
And is he expected to be a December signee wherever?
It's funny. He had September and October decision timeframes. He's never been able to just pull the trigger. So I suspect at this point that he is going to wait
Don't say it, Mark.
just about all the way to signing day. But
March, April, June, July.
no, I don't think it's. I think it'll be early signing period, but it just feels like he's gonna. Okay, so in-homes can start December 2nd. It just feels like he's going to probably go through some of those, and then at that point, it's December 10th or 11th. Well, it's like, well,
Just wait.
what's another week?
Yeah.
So we'll see.
A name that people are talking about in the chat, and the messaging has been constant there, but people want to know about Caleb Downs.
Yeah. Same thing I've probably been saying for a couple weeks now. We're not going to know until I think we will know when you are on the field tomorrow morning. And if Caleb Downs walks out of the tunnel with his parents, we're going to know Caleb Downs visited. I think maybe tonight at the earliest is when he's going to maybe make a comment on it, because he's not going to, I've been saying this for weeks, and at least it's been true so far. The least amount of time he has to deal with his phone blowing up from reporters, the least amount of time he has to deal with, if he is visiting Alabama's coaches or whoever trying to talk him out of it, it's just a lot easier to kind of show up or not show up on Saturday.
So this is all your fault, is what I'm hearing.
Exactly.
You and Nick
It's
Saban.
the media. Yes, it's the media.
Do it.
I continue to be cautiously optimistic that he's going to show up tomorrow.
What is how does his recruitment kind of compare to like a Von Bell or guys in the past that were like you didn't know, and then Ohio State came in and eventually pulled it out?
Yeah, it's weird because he committed to Alabama like over the summer, so it's been a little different. Whereas like Von Bell and Raekwon McMillan stayed uncommitted the whole way. And there were plenty of rumors and stuff with those guys the whole way, but ultimately they didn't commit anywhere first. And so it's hard to kind of compare it to those. What's interesting is I've always kind of felt his best relationships were at Ohio State, but obviously the defense was such a disaster last year, and you just don't know. You can expect all you want out of Jim Knowles. You don't know how the defense is going to look this year.
I think watching Lathan Ransom the last couple of weeks, would make me want to play in this defense kind of safety.
And not only that, it's twofold. One, it's safety-driven defense, as we've talked about, with Lathan Ransom kind of catapulting himself into All-American territory. But on top of that, Lathan Ransom has probably catapulted himself to being a 3-and-done.
Mhm.
He could absolutely go pro.
Ronnie Hickman is
which-
leaving too.
Ronnie Hickman is leaving. McAllister.
Mhm.
And so you've got this defense where you basically play 3 safeties, and you've got 3 playing at a very high level right now, 3 very possibly all off to the NFL. There is, and I'm always the guy who says everyone expects way too much out of true freshmen. They're not going to start, everyone, Sonny Styles is going to be starting by the end of the year. No, he's not. He just turned 18 like yesterday. But Caleb Downs is a physical marvel. He's best safety in the country by a lot. He could absolutely, and he's a smart kid. His brother plays at North Carolina. His dad played in the NFL. Like he's got a great football mind. That could be a guy who comes in and does play early, and maybe even starts, because they need bodies. And if quite frankly, if they don't get Caleb Downs, I would suspect they try and get a portal safety.
Yeah, and I mean, it would not be the first time you saw a true freshman safety from down south who, I mean, that is the Von Bell story. I remember Von Bell's brother was very insistent that Von Bell should be playing, and Von Bell's brother was probably right about that.
And Caleb is even more physically ready. The thing with Von, the only 2 things really with Von were, one, the competition in high school where he played, he was out basically on the Tennessee border, rural Georgia. He's not playing in that greater Atlanta area where Caleb Downs is, where he's playing these huge schools every week. But Von was kind of skinny. Caleb is not. Caleb's very solidly built. I think he's more physically ready to go. I think Von probably did kind of need that little adjustment period where they worked them in, and then you could eventually take over your try. I think Caleb's even, and I loved Von Bell in high school, but I think Caleb's even better and more college ready than Von Bell was.
All right, he mentioned the weather forecast when we were talking about talking about Wilson earlier.
Yeah, what's the latest?
So, Tony, the update on Panda Watch 2022 kickoff temperature 47 degrees, 1% chance of rain. So you're telling me there's a chance. Sunny, winds out of the southwest at 7 miles an hour. By 3 o'clock, sort of towards the end of the game, 56, partly cloudy, 0% chance of rain, 8-mile-an-hour winds. Tony, I think the panda is going to be born on Saturday, is what
You said rain, but you didn't say anything about snow.
I did not. Yes, if it snows at 56 degrees, then truly God is against the Buckeyes.
If Ohio State could have put together a forecast for this game, that's pretty much it. Like very little wind, no rain. Let's just go play and see what happens.
I'm sure Ohio State wishes Arian Carter was visiting this weekend and not for the Indiana, the Indiana freezing, windy, whatever.
Super chat from Jordan Kapler. Hope everyone is having a great week. Looking forward to tomorrow. Great to see you all here. Well, most of you.
And then you made Kevin read that. I mean, that's very hurtful.
No, he's talking about you. Just so you know, just to be clear.
No, I'm sure.
No, I'm reading it because I know you'd be like, oh, that's just hateful.
Thank you for that, Jordan. Thank you all, everybody, for the super chats so far. Thank you for the super chats to come.
Dave Larman wants to know: Michigan scores 35 points. Do they win or lose?
Michigan scores 35.
Yeah, I think
they win.
I think they win. Yeah, I mean,
I think they almost certainly win.
Unless it's a 62-39 kind of game again. That like Ohio State. I don't think Ohio State's winning a game 38-35. I think if Michigan scores 35 points, either they're winning or Ohio State has scored 50-something points again.
Just that to me would be such a bad defensive performance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially again, that to me tells me Michigan is getting the breaks, hitting the shots that they haven't hit this season.
Probably sustaining drives,
scoring in the red zone. As we were talking about this earlier, and Ross was here, I'm thinking like, if they score 35, then they're probably going to score in the 40s because they're playing so well to get in the 30s that they're probably going to get to the 40s because Ohio State's not mounting enough of a defense. And if they're playing well in the red zone and they're getting their shots and they're getting a break here or there, like 35, make it 42 at this point because everything is clicking for them. I don't expect that to happen, but
unless they go in like 8 overtimes and they keep trading
A short yard.
Yeah, but at that point, if you go into 8 overtimes, like 6 of them, you're only doing 2 points at a
That's
time.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They get into overtime at 21, and then they just start nailing 2-point conversions left and right.
From what we've seen from Ohio State, that would actually never, the plays would never actually get off. So I don't know how they would be able to get to a third overtime because the 2-point conversion would be delays. You'd eventually be doing it from like the 50.
We have get back coaches. I've put my name out there that I will be a timeout coach. I'll be a clock management coach at any level that's willing to pay me enough money, because obviously it's something that's needed. It's not just an Ohio State thing, but it certainly is an Ohio State thing.
I think we've talked in the past when all of these staffs go infinite and there's no cap, there is going to be like a general manager of the clock, of these like the situational manager type of thing that is in the coach's ear constantly, like, hey, this is this and this is this. Although with Ryan Day, like Kevin, they don't talk, like you don't want him in his, you don't want people in his ear. Like Jim Knowles, like I don't want people in my ear when I'm calling the play. It's quiet. Right. So I don't know how you.
I majored in clock. I majored in clock management. And I minored in 2-point conversion theory.
Here's an interesting question. Do you think Michigan steals signs? There was an article in the Athletic, I think, this week about the fact that, talking to assistant coaches who had played these two teams earlier in the year, and one of them talked about the fact that Michigan had stolen their signs. That really takes me back to Brent Venables and the 2020 Sugar Bowl and how Ohio State dealt with things in that game.
They waited until like the final seconds to like send a play in, or they would like shield stuff. They basically neutered the Clemson defense by how they did it. And you could tell like, oh, they clearly steal signs because they have no shot here in this one.
I think everyone tries to steal signs at some level.
Yeah.
I think it depends on how easy a team makes it to steal. I think
that's your fault.
I think every team puts some amount of effort into stealing signs. And if you make them exert a certain level of effort to do it, it becomes okay.
With the oodles of money they make, they should have green dot helmets with the communication in it. Then
Odysseus wants to know, follow up on another defensive 5-star defensive end. Is Keon Keeley coming this week?
I'm not expecting him. He hasn't come out and said he's not coming, but he's never really been expected to come. I know Ohio State would love it if he showed up, but I'm not expecting him at the moment. But there's another defensive end to watch this weekend as well. We need to talk about. It's Joshua Mickens out of Indianapolis. He's committed to LSU. Made an unofficial recent, I guess it would have been 2 weeks ago, and making his official this weekend. And not, you could call him insurance for Damon Wilson and Keon Keeley and these guys, but also a guy they would take and still take the other guys. So I would categorize him as a little bit better than just insurance here. Really good pass rusher.
Well, I mean, it's very different than it being somebody that you get at the last minute to fill in a class, former LSU commit, like,
I mean, he's
mid to high 4-star type of guy.
Line top 100.
I mean, he's real.
Yeah, really good player. This is more of a case of, obviously they need defensive ends in this class. They need at least 2 more. They could totally get away with taking 3 more. And this is a guy they've done their extensive, look at and senior film and everything else. Had a great senior year and fits the build of kind of again a little bit of Damon. Well, he's a little bigger than Damon Wilson, but he's kind of that type of player. He's kind of a pure pass rusher off the edge. So with the things they're trying to do with the jack position and everything else, they are short on those types of bodies. So.
And we've now talked about 3 of the 4 defensive ends they're sort of actively pursuing right now. The 4th question from Timper: what about the ukulele kid from Southern California that is either Tiny Tim or Mateo Uyunglele? I'm going to guess he means the latter. Any expectation that he would be in Columbus?
I'm not. It's a non-zero chance, but he's not on our list at this point. Has not indicated he's coming. So we'll see. He's been up several times the last year, so I like where Ohio State's at there. I think USC's success this year is going to make things, I think, a little interesting as we wind toward this. This was always going to be the thing with any kid from SoCal was, okay, you know, USC's down, and when USC's down, I've said it before, it's going to be kind of harsh, but I'll say this with Kevin right here too, because Kevin deserves to hear this too, but
he is the worst. You're
fair
right.
weatherness of Southern Californians is mind-blowing.
No, Kevin, don't walk away.
No, please don't go.
When USC
wow, the numbers
is,
are going up on the show. That's
exactly.
weird.
Yeah.
Super chats are rolling in.
Yes. When USC is struggling, the prospects, they just scatter
Mhm.
all over the country. They just scatter. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame. They
Nebraska.
everywhere. for a minute, for like a quick minute there, yeah. So I was out there in August a couple of years ago. It was like right at kind of the height of the Clay Helton, like, why is he still coaching here type stuff. And I went to like 5 or 6 high schools. I went to 4 games in like 5 days. I talked to a bunch of kids. Most of them were Ohio State targets. Some of them weren't. Like I was there to, I was able to talk to like Justin Flo, and I was able to guys like the Corey Foreman, who Ohio State was recruiting at that point. And USC was an afterthought, just a total afterthought. Wasn't even in Flo's top 5. And then you talk to Corey Foreman, and it was all Ohio State, SEC, mostly SEC. And you wouldn't hear anything about USC. But every time I would talk to like an adult, they would tell me if USC gets a splash higher, it doesn't matter if they're not on this kid's top 5 or this kid's top 10, or they're going to get a lot of these kids. And sure enough, as things started to stabilize, they were able to start recruiting very well here the last year or so. And the question was, will Lincoln Riley, how immediate will Lincoln Riley's impact be? And look, I think USC's got some issues on defense.
With Alex Grinch in charge?
Yeah, exactly. Who would have thought?
But Mateo could go in there and conceivably start.
But exactly. So what USC is
Play.
going to sell guys like Mateo on is like, look, our offense is elite. We have a championship caliber offense. We're going to have a championship caliber offense next year when Caleb Williams is back. We need dudes on defense to win, to take us from, fringe playoff team to legitimate, maybe national championship favorite, contender, whatever you want to call it. And so that's going to be the pitch. And it's a lot easier to do that when you're sitting there in the top 6 teams, and it's not so much a sales pitch at that point. It's kind of reality. If USC had a top 20 defense, we'd be talking about them much differently than we're talking about them right now. And so Riley's early success allows them to flip the script. So I say all that fair weather is to say, the moment USC becomes cool and fun again, all those kids who don't even really look at USC will end up at USC. A lot of them will. It's the most interesting dynamic, I think, in college football.
Who wouldn't want to play in Alex Grinch's defense? I mean, to be coached up by that Washington State great.
I think it's more not Alex Grinch. It's more you start to get the star power back, and all of a sudden Will Ferrell's on the sidelines and Snoop Dogg's on the sidelines. And if Snoop Dogg's on the sidelines, you get a chance to meet Martha Stewart potentially. I mean, you can't. High school kids aren't going to pass that up.
It's 75 degrees every day.
Well,
I mean, Andy Samberg showing up would get me, very excited. Trying to do his bad beer raps.
the 2020 quarterback class out of California, Bryce Young, DJ Uiagalelei, and CJ Stroud, and they all went elsewhere. And Lincoln Riley's not going to let that happen. He will grab somebody.
And then moving forward, you had Malachi Nelson was committed to Riley at Oklahoma, so he had flown the coop. And the minute, yeah, sure, okay, it's the same guy recruited you at Oklahoma, but a lot of that was, I know USC is going to be exciting again, or I think USC is going to be exciting again. Now I want back in. It's just, I don't think that dynamic exists anywhere else in college football. I really don't. Like, if Ohio State has a couple down years, the Ohio kids are still going to back them. If if Alabama has a couple of down years, the Alabama kids are still going to back them. It's just so different. I guess maybe you could argue South Miami.
Well, I was going to say
the only other place that's like it.
USC is a more powerful Miami.
Yeah.
And more able to sustain stuff and is more real. It's like more tangible than the make believe of Miami. But even like Clark Phillips was in that 2020 class out of California. USC would love to have him.
Yeah.
Court Williams, assuming he was healthy.
Yeah. Super chat from
Bo
David
Collins went
Greenshield.
to Clemson.
Yeah.
Receiver. I mean,
Yeah.
they just scattered.
Like and all of those
incredible.
Bosco guys, like if they just keep those guys home.
And that's what even the Bosco, the coaches of those high schools will tell you, like, Ohio State or Georgia or whoever is doing a great job recruiting our school. They just gotta hope that USC doesn't.
I mean, the
reemerge.
only school that's really kind of been constant, even in their down years, has been Mater Dei. I mean, Ohio State was in on Rajon Davis, really had a good shot at landing him, I thought, but it's been a minute since Ohio State's landed a Mater Dei kid, going back to Nikki Sualua.
Super chat from David Greenshield. USC lost to Notre Dame. Both teams tomorrow, meaning Ohio State and Michigan, make the playoff. Is it that simple? I mean, at that point, you figure, if LSU beats Georgia, then those two teams are probably both in. And, if TCU wins out, then, there's a way that doesn't happen. But if Notre Dame beats USC, there's almost not an argument to leave Ohio State out unless Ohio State somehow loses by 4 touchdowns. Because then Ohio State has a win over Notre Dame, and Notre Dame has a win over USC. Notre Dame has a win over Clemson. I mean, you
still have to talk about TCU, though.
Well,
TCU's the fly in the ointment there.
Well,
ESPN is a playoff predictor machine. I can run through it right now if you want.
You should. That's definitely. Let's do that. And then let's do the NHL draft lottery, which might be of interest to folks in Central Ohio as well.
But what was the question in terms of
if USC loses to Notre Dame, both teams tomorrow, Ohio State, Michigan, both make the playoffs.
I even saw this on ESPN where if Michigan at that point has like almost like a 77% chance of making the playoffs regardless, and Ohio State is in the 80s.
Tyler Shoemaker and I were talking about this the other night, and
on what podcast?
On the yet to be named on the college football playbook show. But it's interesting. I think obviously Notre Dame winning would provide incredible insulation to Ohio State. We're less confident on the Michigan side of things. If they lose, just because of the non-conference.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
It's going to be so heavily scrutinized. But I think it's very possible. I think it's very possible. And for the record, I'm just gonna keep being wrong about this. Maybe, I guess, I don't know. I'm gonna be like the TCU Mark May this year, I guess, where he's kept picking Ohio State to lose in 2002. I don't think TCU is gonna be undefeated on the final rankings.
They're just playing with so much fire.
It wouldn't shock me if they lost this week. Like we were talking about this, like
Iowa State.
Yeah, like this is totally the game Matt Campbell wins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like if you're not following Iowa State is, you're playing NCAA and you've turned the offensive and special team sliders down to 0 and the defensive sliders up to 10. Like that's Iowa State this year, and it's just every game is 13-9 or 16-10, and those are the
3 games.
Yeah, those are the games where if it's a low scoring game, that's where it's the one stupid play, the one the punt hits Nate Clement's leg. It's the one stupid thing, and then that's where you get the shocking upset.
It just wouldn't surprise me if TCU lost either of the next 2 weeks. I actually think they will lose one of the next 2 weeks. I don't know if it will be this week or not, but it wouldn't shock me.
So I plugged both Ohio State and Michigan into the ESPN playoff predictor, and you do the scenarios. Michigan with a loss, still 75% chance to make it. Ohio State with a loss, 87%, with a 30% chance to win the championship.
And is this with Notre Dame beating USC?
This really has to factor those things in, but there are no places.
This isn't like 538 that has multiple check boxes. A much better version of this.
No, this 538. Yeah, go predict.
The New York Times says Hillary Clinton is 57%
right,
to win
hey,
college football.
I'm not there for that. I'm there for these predictions and everything else. I want to talk about Tom's favorite topic, the Big Ten West.
Well, hang on before we get off.
I'm leaving.
Wild Big Ten West.
Before we get off of draft simulators and all that, it took about 15 tries, but the 2023 NFL Draft Lottery Simulator has spit out something where Columbus jumps to number 1. Mark, who do you take at number 1 if you're it's a real mystery. It could be anyone.
Yes. Is Connor, is it Bedard? Is it
I believe it's
Bedard?
I believe
Is it
it's
French.
I believe it's Bedard, but
Yeah.
yes, let's save big money at Bedard's.
You and I both know that the Blue Jackets have a long, illustrious history of doing what is in its worst interest over the long term, just to get a couple of rowdy fans riled up. So they will at some point, probably like February, rip off some sleepy 7-game winning streak that will catapult them into like the 7th or 8th pick of the draft.
Well,
When in a draft where there's 3 like
Yeah.
studs at the top,
always, like,
they will
right
pick
on the
5th or
outside.
6th, and it'll all be because at some point they had a stupid winning streak that didn't matter. And we'll have a segment of our fan base that sits here and says, well, they finished strong. Let's get really excited about 8 months from now in October. Like it doesn't, nothing,
Tank it.
it does not, they've done studies on this. It doesn't carry over. The way a hockey team plays in March does not carry over to the following October. It doesn't.
So what I'm hearing is Blue Jackets should be buyers at the deadline. Is that am I reading this correctly?
Hashtag go hard for Bedard.
There you go.
Let everyone rest up, heal everybody, trade off Nyquist at the deadline.
So speaking of terrible organizations, the Big Ten West. Sorry, Kevin, I interrupted you earlier. At 4:00 today, we find out whether we have the opportunity to potentially go see the Iowa football team in person for the second time this season. Only too many, Kevin. Are you excited? If Iowa wins today, are you kind of secretly hoping Ohio State loses on Saturday just to spare you another exposure to Brian Ferentz?
I am going to take in some of the St. Elmo cocktail sauce and snort it if I have to watch that game, because I mean, seriously, it would be less painful than watching that blankety blank offense that they have. It is horrible.
I mean, is it really bad if it's good enough to win the Big Ten West?
What do you think it says more about? Do you think it says more about the Iowa offense and Brian Ferentz and the fact that nepotism laws are unnecessary, or do you think it maybe says the Big Ten West might not be the strongest division in college football?
The entire Big Ten this year. What would Penn State be in a good conference this year? Because they're going to finish like 10-2, assuming they don't trip up against Michigan State, which is totally possible because they're not outstanding. But it's a 3-team conference. And
But who's a good conference this year? There are not a lot of great teams. I
I
mean,
think Pac-12 is better than the Big Ten this year. But because there's more at the top. They're not at the top better than necessarily
Penn
the Big
State
Ten.
and UCLA play a 3-game series, home, and then like a neutral site like in
Denver.
St. Louis or something.
Fake news. Every UCLA game is a neutral site.
Well, I'm just trying to take out some of the bias variables. I mean, Penn State beats UCLA. I mean, the Pac-12 is Oregon, SC, Utah.
Mhm.
I mean, I think those 3 teams have, realistic shots there. I mean, Penn State's the 3rd best team in the Big Ten.
Stanford beat Notre Dame.
Marshall did too.
Hey, I can argue that the AAC or the Sun Belt, whichever conference that Marshall is in right now, the MAC, no, they're not in the MAC any longer.
They're not in the MAC anymore.
I just really disappointed in the Big Ten this year overall, and every time it looked like somebody in the Big Ten West. Oh, this is Purdue. They're going to do it. Oh, it's Minnesota, and all the while I was just sitting back there like smoking a cigarette, like you'll be back.
Well, I mean, birded. I mean, Illinois seemed to be in this great position, and they got exposed. And
I'm so glad he's back because he is one of the best coaches in the Big Ten history, honestly. And the fact that he did what he wasn't able to do it at Arkansas, but can do it in the Big Ten is also another.
there's 2.5 competent teams in the Big Ten, and none of them reside in the West.
All right, we have picked up some additional viewers, so let's circle back real quickly. And I know everyone loves Iowa football talk, but let's circle back a little bit to the other game that will determine who Iowa could play in Indianapolis. We'll keep it Iowa adjacent in that way for you, Kevin.
But first, Tom, since Mark is here, I want to play America's favorite game show.
Oh, let's do that. My favorite game, my
Which
least favorite game.
Is I'm going to give you.
We'll see if Mark actually watches the shows, because if he doesn't know what this game show is.
I'm going to give you the name of an old-time Buckeye, or maybe a current Buckeye, somebody who's played in Ohio State history. I need you to give me a year that he played within 3 either way. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Your Buckeye is Furl Mengus. I'm sorry. That's just a made up name I made up for Tom one time. Here's a real one that I've given to Tom before that is it's amazing. Gust Zarnis. Gust Zarnis.
2017.
Real name.
Real name.
Real
This
name.
is a real
Scholarship
name.
player.
Well, he wore a jersey.
He was a letter winner, I believe.
Yes. Yes. Gust Zarnis. I can give you his jersey number if that would help. He wore number 26.
The Kaiser stole.
Gotta be before my football watching time.
How many Gusts have you known?
Now, is this Gus Zarnis Jr., the third? I mean, from the long line of Zarnis?
Is it
Middle initial C.
Oh, I was hoping it was X. Gust X Zarnis.
Mhm.
oh boy. Say 1949.
Oh, I'm sorry. He played from 1935 to 1937, and then he contracted polio, probably. I'm sorry, that's terrible. You should have said that.
Take a lap.
I'm like, we're right in like I wanted to avoid like a lot of the World War II years.
Yeah.
And we just
Right?
lost
So
30
it's like,
viewers.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
A few before or a few after World War II was kind of my
Now you know why Tom hates that game.
Yeah, there's a bunch of names that are like, well, no one now has that name, which just means it's like it's prior to 1950, and then it's
Mhm.
you can be off by 50 years, and it's like, sure, how would I know when Patches O'Houlihan played for Ohio State? That could be 1902 or 1935. All right, so someone who's going to be playing for Ohio State in 2022 is C.J. Stroud. He's going to be playing against Michigan on Saturday. So let's talk about the Ohio State-Michigan game. What to you, Mark, is the single defining, like, if I tell you one stat, it's like I have come from the future. I am an oracle of some type. I come from the future, and I am saying I will tell you one stat. Then you will have to determine who wins the game.
Points
What
scored.
is the stat?
Points scored.
But other than points scored, Kevin, I'm a real oracle, not a made up one. Come on. I would be able to give you a stat that determines not the actual result, but that
I was
would be
just
informative.
trying to be helping.
Michigan's third down conversion percentage.
That's an interesting one.
Exotic.
Why is that the most interesting stat to you?
Well, I mean, I think it's a key stat in any game, but they had such issues keeping Michigan off schedule last year. And, if Michigan is 3 for 15 on third down, I can surmise one of two things. Either Ohio State's short yardage defense was phenomenal, which is key, or more likely so, they kept Michigan off schedule and J.J. McCarthy could not convert 3rd and 8 and 3rd and 10.
Do you know what Michigan's third down conversion was last year in the game?
Did they even have to convert one?
I was going to say, is it
Did they
like
even
4
get to
for
third
6?
down? Did they even
It was-
get to third down?
It was 5 of 8,
Oh, they did get to third down.
and they were 1 of 1 on 4th down.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
2 failures there.
Yeah, that's and that was, I mean, the last
And only 8 third downs.
right, only 8 third downs,
That's
and you're converting 5 of
ridiculous.
them,
Yeah.
and then you picked up another one on
They were
4.
6 of 7 scoring touchdowns in the red zone as well. So
Yeah, I mean that's another one where you tell me Michigan's red zone touchdown percentage, touchdown or red zone touchdown scoring, touchdowns versus attempts. That would be a good one. I frankly think net rushing yards per carry. If you tell me that, just
Yeah,
Ohio
that's
State, and I'm sort of cheating there because that's giving me sort of 2 stats,
Mhm.
but that is the one that you go back to 2002. Every year, the team that has won the net rushing yards per carry has won the game. Every single year, there was one in 2012 where it was dead even and Ohio State won. Every other year, Michigan has won the net yards per
And wasn't
carry
that
in
the-
2003, 2011, and 2021. That's it.
42.
No,
That was
t-
last
yeah,
year.
26.
13.
That was 26-21 in 2012. Yeah, but yeah, that's a good one.
Tom, last year the reason Michigan's rushing total wasn't exactly they did lose yards on 2 carries, which were kneel downs.
Yes,
That's the only time they lost yards on the ground. It was the 2 kneel downs, which
those were also the 2 times that Michigan didn't score touchdowns in their last 7 drives. They had the I think they might have run it into the line at the end of the half once for like 3 yards, and then they had 2 kneel downs at the end of the game, and that was it. Other than that, the other 5 drives where they were actually trying to score points, they scored 7 points every time.
So they averaged 7.2 yards per carry last year. Any team that does that this week, I predict they will win.
Yeah. Anyone who's, I mean, is there a 7.2? Like, okay, yeah. If Ohio State is running for 7.2 yards per carry, Ohio State is winning this game by about 30. If Michigan's running for 7.2 yards per carry, this is, we're having a very deep conversation about Jim Knowles on the post-game show. But what is the number below that? Like 7.2. It's like, well, yeah, if Ohio State scores 100 points, they're going to win the game. Like, okay, yeah. What is the number yards per carry for Michigan where it's like, I think Michigan has a good chance to win the game if they hit this number of yards per carry?
Anybody want to go first?
That sounds like a Todd question.
Gust?
Sorry. No, I think, as I said before, they averaged 7.2 yards per carry, and we're in a 1-score game at the end. But I think if Michigan is like at 6 yards per carry, that's a terrible sign for Ohio State because this is a Blake Corum who isn't 100% healthy, Donovan Edwards who isn't 100% healthy. You would think that Ohio State would win more battles than they lose against the run, or as much as Jim Knowles knows that this is what Michigan does. This is what I have to set out to stop. And if J.J. McCarthy throws for 240 yards, you accept that. Like, you don't want Michigan rushing for 240 yards, so you set out to stop that. So I think if they're at 6, they're at 5.5, then things didn't work out as planned.
Yeah, I think even boy, I wouldn't want to see anything above 5.
Yeah, I was going to say 5.5 was
think
kind
there's
of
a
where I was.
range there, 5.5, where you're still like winnable, assuming you don't also let McCarthy be efficient.
But
Make big
it's like
plays.
3.3, you win.
No doubt. Anything under 4, I think you win. Anything 4.5 to 5 is probably a 1-score game, and then I think anything over 5, you're going to be. I think it could be tough, but again, there's like a sliding scale there of like, okay, how many yards per carry plus JJ McCarthy's efficiency? So like the more efficient McCarthy is, the lower the yards per carry I think can be for Michigan.
Multiplied by
Yes.
the protection that CJ Stroud receives and time to throw the ball, and then you carry the one, and boom, 42-39.
And then you got to
Times
factor the
yaw
wind.
divided by the speed of sound. Okay.
All right, so if we're factoring the wind, let's give you the updated forecast. It was 47 degrees and sunny at kickoff, like a 7 or 8 mile an hour wind, and then the end of the game, you're looking at like partly cloudy. How will that impact things? With a 0% chance of rain and a like 8 mile an hour wind. This is as perfect as weather is possibly going to be for the Ohio State Michigan game. I would ask you who we think that benefits, but I have a feeling the audience has probably puzzled that one out a little bit over the last 12 months.
It benefits the blood pressure of Ohio State fans. It seems to be no one seems to be worried more about the weather than the Ohio State fans in this game for some reason. And it's just like, coming off a year where Stroud threw for 400 yards in the snow, I think we're agonizing over this a little too much. But
Kevin, you got something?
No, I'm just kind of looking at some of Michigan's passing numbers from over the course of the year, and the only time that they really asked McCarthy to be the passer was against Indiana, and he was 28 of 36 for 304, 3 touchdowns, and threw a pick. But since then, he's broken 200 once, and that was in the Illinois game, and obviously they had to ask him to be a passer at the end of that game, and he's just the numbers are unremarkable. I mean, 17 to 24, no touchdowns and a pick against Penn State, 15 to 20, but he didn't need to do much there. They had that game on lock. 15 to 26, 13 to 27, 10 of 20.
Well, in that Indiana game, they did a good job against the run. They sold out a little bit. Of course, that was also the game where Mike Hart went down. So the running game was an issue for much of that game. I think that was their lowest rushing total until this past week against Illinois. But yeah, I mean, J.J. McCarthy completed 77.8% of his passes in that game. But as I say, Ohio State's pass defense is not Indiana's. Although sometimes it can be when there are some breakdowns and some communication issues at corner. So I just think if I don't care. You have to make JJ McCarthy beat you. Like that's. I don't see any other plan of attack other than that. Yes, you always go to stop the run, and so that's what you do. And then boom, like this is very easy math.
It's not just the numbers though. Like if you just watch him,
Yeah,
he doesn't look as comfortable as he did at the beginning of this. He doesn't. It looks like it's almost in his head of like some of these throws. I mean, he missed some throws the last couple weeks. Illinois just overthrown the tight end. I mean, wide open. It's just like that was a completion, week 3, 4, whatever. And so it's a confidence thing, I think, right now.
But it's a spray chart too. It's overthrow, it's underthrow, it's 4 yards too far leading him, it's 5 yards behind the guy. I mean, it's all over the place. I mean, it's just, remember CJ Stroud, some of the early concerns with him is, he's just, he's bringing in everything too hot or whatever. But, for whatever reason, McCarthy's not been able to settle it down.
Yeah, that incompletion to the tight end, there's no touch. He didn't have the ability to just throw it with touch over the defender and threw it over the tight end as well.
In the chat, Mark May is picking Michigan, apparently.
What?
So just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that as I'm reading.
It's a good indicator.
Reading the chat.
Do you have any news about ponies that have more than one trick? Or
Well, what do who do you think Desmond picks?
oh, well, that's impossible. Well,
Only
let's
one
see.
way to know. You got to tune in.
I mean, I was going to
Um,
say, and will he be able to
Pittsburgh
deliver it without a bunch of cackling?
Hang on, Desmond.
Well, I mean,
Howard.
he's still got to stick to his playoff predictor, which did have Michigan in it. So
Mhm.
kudos to him. He can slap himself on the back for that one. But there's Texas A&M, there's Pitt, and there was the fourth one, TCU maybe? No,
No.
No. that was
Texas
way-
A&M, Pitt.
Texas A&M, I believe.
It was A&M and Pitt.
And Michigan and Washington.
No, it wasn't
It was
Washington.
Another team that was.
It was another bad team. Yes, that is correct, Mark.
I feel like it was Baylor, Texas A&M, Pitt, and Michigan. But I'm pulling
Baylor, that is
It was
correct.
Baylor.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought so
he was
too, but
trying to
then I
avoid
was
dropping
like,
the
I was
6
like,
and
I just
No
couldn't
big
see.
deal.
Yeah.
Texas. Yes, here I pulled it up. Texas A&M and Pittsburgh on one side of the bracket. Baylor and Michigan on the other side of the bracket.
So his final 4 picks have a combined they have 20 losses, 18 losses.
But Baylor's up on UT right now.
Mm-hmm.
Good for them.
So his average Final Four team lost 4.5 games this year. I mean,
And the fourth team, the Outlier, there had a schedule that was set up for 11-0, maybe 10-1 prior to this
by
game.
the end of the weekend, that it could be 20, 21 losses for his Final Four.
Well, I mean, they throw the
That's
word around.
way
They
off.
throw the label expert around a little too lightly. And
Tony, speaking of experts, TJ Williams says, just listen to the Bold Prediction Show on the Buckeye Weekly podcast feed. Tom is the hero we don't deserve by letting Tony Gerderman have his 223 pointer. You guys have been killing it all season. If Ohio State wins, I'll sign up for an annual membership to Buckeye Huddle. I mean, I think everyone should take that pledge right now. I mean, if you're an Ohio State fan and you can make that happen, I think that's really, frankly, it's the least you can do.
I mean, and yeah, I think that's fair if that happens. And we need to come up with something that if we get like 50 signups, like right after the game, that Tony will do like the next show, like in a T-Rex costume or something.
I would do that. I would do that if one person.
No, don't
jump into a
lowball.
body of water. Of maybe we'll negotiate which body of water that
Can't be
is,
Mirror
but I
Lake.
will
It can't be
I
Mirror
will
Lake.
jump into a body of water if we get 100 annuals by Sunday night.
Can't be Olentangy River because I don't believe there's any water in there anymore.
Let's touch real quick on the Jim Knowles piece of this whole thing, because Jim Knowles was brought in like 2 weeks after the Michigan game last year, and it's like no one really wanted to say, well, it's because of the Michigan game last year, but boy, the timing sure worked out neatly for it to be, again, because of the Michigan game last year. This is the week that they have been what they needed to be. I think they're top 5, top 8 nationally in SP Plus and defense. We have said for years, if they had a top 10 defense, they're a national championship contender. Mm-hmm. This is the week that we find out, is that a function of bad Big Ten offenses, or is this a function of Jim Knowles has really fixed it? What is your confidence level like 1 to 10, with 10 being a Jim Knowles has absolutely fixed the Ohio State defense, and 1 being they did play Iowa and Rutgers and other teams. What is your level of confidence that Jim Knowles has fixed the Ohio State defense, and the Ohio State defense will hold Michigan to 24 points or less on Saturday?
I'm pretty confident that he has fixed it to a Michigan level of stoppability. That there's some irony there that you go get a Big 12 defensive coordinator to stop a Big 10 offense, and Big 10 offense being Michigan's run first offense, where he's, what we're going to do? Let's go get a spread defense and stop this run first offense. But I do feel like and I've said this before, if you look at these numbers for Michigan offensively and you take away the Michigan part of it and you just throw these numbers out there, what is there that's like, oh my gosh, this is very fearful. Yeah, they're running the ball well, but so is Ohio State numbers wise. The throwing game isn't there to make you think that they can be two-dimensional. So I think if you just remove the Michigan aspect of it, this would be any other Big Ten game. You're looking at Ohio State by 21, something like that. There's no concern here. The concern is what Michigan did last year. Ohio State has done everything since then to change that, to address those things. Michigan has done what to address what Ohio State has done? Like Michigan at this point is like, I don't need to change. I'm just going to stay on this path.
Good old rock.
Good old rock.
Nothing beats rock.
Nothing beats rock.
Sean Patrick Keene says, true or false, last year's Michigan win over Ohio State was a fluke. Mark?
Define fluke.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. It wasn't a fluke. I mean,
Outlier versus fluke. It wasn't a fluke.
Ohio State got the exact result it deserved last year. Do I think what I think is meant by fluke here, if I can put words in his mouth, is this a new trend now, or is Ohio State going to now rip off, 5-6 in a row? My belief would be that we're not going to see Michigan win on Saturday, or likely at all in the next couple of years. But
wow, 0-12 next year.
I think, yes. Michigan will never win again, ever.
with that
Annual
stellar stellar non-conference schedule.
No, I would bet on things kind of reverting back to, Ohio State,
the natural order of
Ohio
things.
State winning a significant amount of the time, but
Nature is
in terms of the actual game, Ohio State got exactly what they deserved last. There was nothing fluky about those 60 minutes.
No, the fluke was where the state of the coaching staff was, and Ryan Day being very stubborn in terms of wanting a defense that Ohio State wasn't really set to run, and then reversing course mid-season and rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, and it just they got what they got. They got beat. I mean, Ohio State didn't lose the game. Michigan beat them last year, but in terms of it being a fluke, it was an outlier.
Right.
I think it was the exception, but Michigan kicked that door down and took that game. It wasn't a case of Ohio State said, "Come on in, eat the food out of my fridge, dance with my wife."
Do you mind if we dance? That was a very do you mind if we dance with your date second half of that game? No question. Our buddy Marcus Hartman just tweeted this out very topically. Speaking of great Ohio State revenge games, you think of the 1969 game as the big famous Michigan revenge game, and that being the year after the 50-14 and couldn't go for 3, yada yada yada. The 1970 game, that was the Ohio State revenge game. The year after the series comes back to Columbus. Jim Stillwagon, this is a quote that he gave to Marcus Hartman years later when Marcus was at Buckeye Sports Bulletin. He says, quote, "It was a pure revenge game. Michigan is terrible winners and good losers because you liked beating them," he said with a laugh. "But they went way out of their bounds after they beat us. I hear over and over about 69, but no one talks about 70. When they came down and we were undefeated, and we kicked the poop out of them. I always remember Bo saying that was the worst physical beating that any team he had ever coached had, but so be it. Quote, you'll meet 1,000 people who will tell you about the game in 69 at Michigan, but the biggest physical butt kicking Michigan ever got, Bo Schembechler said, was in 1970. You won't hear anyone from Michigan say they remember the 1970 game. They quit, period, close quote. When you looked up numbers earlier this week about, that Ohio State doesn't lose that much. But when they do lose, The game after they lose, the team, when they play that team again, there is a pretty clear trend there.
Well, Ryan Day has had this opportunity 3 times as the Ohio State head coach to play a team that had beaten them the last time they played. So he had Iowa. He was the offensive coordinator as part of that in 2017, that loss. And he was the offensive coordinator for the 2018 loss to Purdue. And of course, the head coach for the 2019 loss to Clemson. He has since been able to play those 3 teams as head coaches. In those 3 games, he's 3-0 with an average win of 54-23. And that's not just because they blew out Iowa and Purdue. It's also because they blew out Clemson as well. And then you go back, the last 19 times Ohio State has played a Big Ten team that beat them previously, Ohio State is 19-0.
Wow.
The last Big Ten team to beat them 2 times in a row was Wisconsin in 2003 and 2004. And the last time Michigan beat them 2 times in a row was 99 and 2000. So it does not happen a lot to beat. I mean, obviously, it doesn't happen a lot to beat Ohio State once. To beat them 2 in a row, even less so.
Yeah, and it just, when we were up in Ann Arbor on Monday, it was interesting to listen to Jim Harbaugh talk about his team and their happy Warriors on a happy mission. And
Let's paint some happy trees.
it was super Bob Ross. And
gosh, now I'm seeing Jim Harbaugh on a fro.
yeah, it was just the way Ohio State talks about this game and the way Michigan talked about that game. I mean, you don't want to read too much into the press conference, but also, can you imagine anyone at Ohio State using the phrase "happy Warriors"?
It's scars on one side, sequoias on the other side. It's really messed up.
And we said it afterwards. We're there in Ann Arbor, and it's like, what do you make of that Happy Warriors? And it's like, that doesn't really, would that fire you up? And joyful jousters, that sort of thing. It's like, let's just ixnay on the Happy Hey Warriors way, I guess. And because even the players were one of the players was like, we're very fired up about this, but Harbaugh is he's odd, as we all know. So if he says something odd, does it mean all that much? I think
it's on brand.
Well, it is on brand, but obviously if Ohio State wins, then we will definitely go back to your Happy Warriors. And did you have the team right mentally? And were you satisfied with the win in 2021 and didn't need anything else? Because your legacy has now just been proven and solidified.
Well, let's just remember too that the born on third base comment, that's irrelevant. And the toughness comments, well, I didn't say that. Well, Josh Gaddis said that, and several of your players agreed with it. And it doesn't matter because the way that Ohio State players remember it, the Michigan program said that. And they're going to, I'm not saying that this is going to determine the outcome, but it's something that has been fueling the fire for 364 days.
The Heisman ceremony last year with Desmond Howard making a joke. I mean, that's something that Luke Rippler said a month ago he thinks about every single day. Like every day he thinks about that crack. And Paris Johnson, I think, talked about it this week as well. CJ Stroud, obviously, you're there and to celebrate a great season, and you've got somebody making fun of your offensive line, somebody from Michigan. And the line, the offense, everybody, like all of that stuff gets thrown around and played, and it's not hidden from anybody. And why should it be?
And when it came out later that we had heard that guys had been sick that week. Guys from Ohio State had been sick that week. The flu had kind of gone through the Ohio State team the week of that game.
At least they didn't cancel.
Well, and a couple of weeks later, CJ Stroud kind of mentioned that in one of the interviews. And that night, Blake Corum tweeted out, "Excuses are tools of incompetence used to build bridges to nowhere and monuments of nothingness, and those who use them seldom specialize in anything else. Go Blue." You get the sense that might get screenshotted and tweeted with whatever gets said after this game if the result is different.
Really? You think people look back on what was said on the internet previously and then turn around and point that into people's faces if they have done something differently?
You should make a Twitter account that exposes that.
Some kind of old take.
Frozen take.
Yes. Yes.
Just chili no, not chili
No, not
take.
chili.
Yeah.
Beans have no place in chili. There's my that's at chili.
That's
taste.
terrible.
That
is outrageous.
Why don't you just go to the Texas Baylor game?
I might. Well, I don't think I can make it down there in time, but Let's go through score predictions because we are now 2 hours in here. I
Mm.
don't know how much longer we're going to go, but let's at least go through some score predictions. Let's start with Mark. Mark, your thoughts?
I've got Ohio State 31, Michigan 21. I had this at about a 6-point game. I have to factor in Corum's injury. I don't think he's going to be 100%. So I'm tacking on an extra field goal there for whatever that's going to be worth. And I think Ohio State by 10. I think it'll be competitive. I think it'll be, Ross kind of alluded to it earlier. It wouldn't shock me if Ohio State needs the first 10, 12 minutes to settle down. It wouldn't shock me if they get a little too juiced. We've seen that before with them in big games.
That's why defer. Don't take the ball.
Yeah, so that wouldn't shock me. But I just think Ohio State's got too much balance on offense. I don't think Michigan's got enough. And I think Knowles will have some tricks up his sleeve that we haven't really seen.
Kevin?
Well, I'll be the first to say that I picked my score before David Greenshield picked my score. So it's already there in the chat. It's going to be thrown out there. I was doing something for Texags earlier in the week, and they asked me a score, and I tried to get out of it. And they said, no, you have to give us a score. So
did they pay you $95 million to give them a score?
Unfortunately, no. I would.
Because you can get it wrong and still get the $95 million. That's what I've heard from Texas.
I haven't seen Jimbo Fisher give Texas A&M a score.
Well, if I get a bonus to share with the rest of the staff, I'm going to pull the Mel Tucker and not share it. Buzzing. I think that Ohio State obviously has a lot of bad feelings about the last game, and I think Michigan is still a very talented team. And say what you will about their terrible schedule, to go 11-0 is impressive. We're only looking at 4 undefeated teams at this point. The loss of Blake Corum, and with whatever his diminished status is, if he's 75%, 60%, 0%, is a big deal. But even without Blake Corum, I liked Ohio State to win this game. I think that they had prepared for him to be there, and if he's not there, I don't think Donovan Edwards or CJ Stokes or Isaiah Gash are going to be able to do any of that. But with that being said, I think the enormity of the whole situation will keep Ohio State within hailing distance. I like CJ Stroud to lead them with the throw game. I think there'll be just enough rushing to win the game and keep Ohio State fans on edge, 35-24. But I reserve the right to change my pick to my backup pick, 63-10.
Oh, wow.
So Kevin is one of those people that fills out multiple NCAA tournament brackets. That's what I'm
No, all I'm saying is what we talked about off air, that I do see more than one path to where Ohio State blows them out.
I would agree. I'm going 63-10 as well.
Who?
I'll get to it. I feel like, as I've said, Ohio State has done the things that they've done in the offseason. They've made their hires and made their fires because of the Michigan game. So they have addressed the things that allowed Michigan to rush for 300 yards against them. And Jim Knowles will have something. And Michigan is not this. If you can stop the run, you're going to win. Now, has anybody stopped the run yet? Not really. But has anybody had Ohio State's defense at this point? And the Ohio State's defensive line, particularly the front seven, I don't think so. So, and then even if you don't stop Michigan entirely, like how many points are they going to score? And what is Michigan's limit? And so I went with 34-24, and I kept dialing Ohio State back down a little bit. And I do think Michigan is going to get not a fluke drive, but they'll have a big play that leads to one score, and they'll have a sustained drive in there. And I just threw another one in there just because there's a lot of just because in this series. So I think I had it like 34-17, but I want another touchdown for Michigan just because, thinking Blake Corum is probably 80%, which I think certainly helps Ohio State. And that's why I would have it 17. But it's the just because factor. It gives them another touchdown.
Yeah, and I have all week been kind of bouncing back and forth. And on Tuesday, I was all ready to pick Michigan. And it's just you haven't heard quite what you would have wanted to hear from the Michigan perspective in terms of Blake Corum's health. I think if Blake Corum's healthy, there's a much clearer path for Michigan to win. And I still think there is a way they win this game if Ohio State does what we have seen Ryan Day teams do in the past in the red zone, and you bog down and you're kicking field goals, and all of a sudden, Ohio State's in the red zone 5 times, so they kick 3 field goals, and they've got 23 points. And you have seen that. And, they have played a bunch of games where if they get to 30, they're unbeaten under Ryan Day. If they don't get to 30, it's like a 500 team. And he, if you get there, I think that's the magic number. I think if they get to 31, they win. And because I don't really see a way Michigan scoring 30 points against this team this year. So I had it 31-20 Ohio State. I'm with you. I think there's a way Michigan wins this game 27-23, but also I think there's a way that if, I don't think 63, I don't think 56, but, there's a way Ohio State, if things really break right for them and Michigan, if Edwards and Corum are really ineffective, this could end up 42-17 kind of thing for Ohio State. But yeah, I went with 31-20. I think we're, this week, it's always Tony and I always pick the game like 1 point off. This week it's Mark and me. But we all it's interesting that we all kind of landed in about the same area. Even Ross, I think he said 34,
33-22.
Well, 33. I think he said 34-21.
Yeah,
but
we're all in the 10, 11 point
Yeah.
range. But let's not forget, and every year's different, and history doesn't necessarily matter for the outcome of what's going to happen here. 2006, it's like the number 1 and the number 2 national top defenses. This is going to be a low scoring game, right? 10-7, something like that. 42-39. So you don't know.
And that may have also been a product of the Big Ten offenses, now that I think about it, where in 2007, Ohio State's defense was kind of that same way. It was probably the top scoring defense nationally, but who were they playing? That 2000 Youngstown State, Kent State, stuff like that in 2007 or whatever. But yeah, double digits, maybe triple digits. We'll see. Promises have been made.
Yeah, and there are a number of Michigan fans in the chat right now who would like us to know that Ohio State's soft, and if this is a neutral field, Ohio State be very worried.
Is it on a neutral field?
It's the weakest Ohio State team in years, right for the picking. I mean, if Ohio State plays Michigan in Arizona in the playoff semifinal, if they play Michigan in SoFi on a neutral field, dry, fast track, I don't think that favors Michigan. I mean, if Corum's healthy again, sure, okay, but if Jackson Smith and if Corum's back, that probably gives Michigan another touchdown at least. If Jackson Smith and Jigba's back, how does that work for the Michigan secondary? Because, you can say Ohio State's run defense, well, I haven't faced a run attack like Michigan. And yeah, fine, stipulated. Okay. Has Michigan played a passing attack, anything like what they're going to face on Saturday? And then if you add Jackson Smith and Jigba into that again on a neutral field in a month, how's that working out for you? I don't know if it's great.
And if you give Ohio State's running backs 30 more days of recuperation and they gain 10, 12, 15% back in the tank or whatever, I mean, that's all well and good. But, talking about, they're so soft and neutral field or whatever. Well, I mean, I hope the Michigan team bus knows where Ohio Stadium's been, because it's been a while since they've been there.
Well, and yeah, there are 2 Michigan Wolverines who have played in Ohio Stadium. That's kicker Jake Moody and that's receiver Ronnie Bell. And that's not a lot. And there have been one Ohio State Buckeye has recorded a stat against Michigan in Ohio Stadium, and that is Cameron Brown. I think 9 total have played. I believe 20 players were on the team, 20 scholarship players were on the team in 2018. It has been so freaking long since Ohio State and Michigan have played in Ohio Stadium. Chris Olave was a true freshman. That seemed like a lifetime ago. That was when he was a true freshman, blocking a punt, catching 2 touchdowns. So much has happened since then. But that was a long time ago. And that was the last time Michigan was in Ohio Stadium. I think this is going to be one of those where if you're an Ohio State fan and you don't leave without a voice, you've done it wrong in this game.
Did want to touch briefly on a recruiting element here. Wayne Taylor wants Mark to explain his thoughts again on the South Dakota quarterback who's visiting this weekend. Obviously, Brock Glenn recently flipped to Florida State in what Alex Gleitman characterized as a mutual decision, and we'll leave it at that. They have this guy coming in. He's from South Dakota. South Dakota, not exactly a football hotbed. Last time Ohio State got a player.
Don't tell that to Grant Schmidt.
Yeah, last time Ohio State got a player from there was from South Dakota was 2015. They brought in offensive lineman Grant Schmidt, who stayed on campus for about 17 minutes and then ended up transferring back to South Dakota State, I believe. What are your thoughts on, we're 3.5 weeks from early signing day, so it's getting late pretty early. What are your thoughts on the guy they're bringing in this weekend?
Well, I think that they think they've got kind of a hidden gem here. Corey Dennis went to watch him throw. I think it was over the bye week back in October. So this started to simmer well before Brock Glenn publicly decommitted and flipped to Florida State. So here's my thing. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, he should be a 5-star, and now he's moving up the rankings, and I'm not going to tell fairy tales. I've heard people, call him the best prospect ever come out of South Dakota and all that, whatever that means. But
what about Alaska? Are they overlooking Alaska and Vermont?
I would say maybe both Dakotas.
But here's what I would say. If Ohio State was scrambling for a plan B, warm body, have to meet a numbers quota, the last place on earth they would send Corey Dennis is South Dakota. It is the last place they would go. So they think they've got somebody here. Obviously, they went to some lengths to make sure this didn't get out beyond, I think, a little tweet that went out in October from the high school thanking Corey Dennis for stopping by, which he probably didn't love that went out.
I mean, a lot of people follow South Dakota high school football accounts. So,
well, a lot of Ohio State fans do their Twitter investigating, and we're able to unearth that a little bit. But so I'm not going to sit here and like, I haven't seen him. Like, I've watched the film. Looks good. Kid's a good athlete, great arm, playing terrible teams every week, but looks good. Washington obviously liked him very much, took him early, but they think they've got something here. And I don't think we would have seen things play out the way they have if not for them thinking that, and also thinking they're going to flip him here in pretty short order. So I expect him in the class. This feels to me like, even though the order of operations publicly is not playing out this way, this feels to me like they've got this kind of figured out, and it's just going to kind of play out backwards.
Yeah.
if everyone's catching my drift. But clearly, again, you have a bye week and you're sending Corey Dennis to South Dakota.
You're telling a quarterback in the class.
Right. Yeah. And you're like,
See ya.
Check out what else is happening out there.
Have you heard about Florida State?
Yeah. If this was some plan B, scramble, panic, you're looking at Ohio kids. Maybe you're going to some school in Atlanta that produces a lot of talent, that maybe has a 3-star under recruited quarterback, and you get in there and make them happy. You're not going to South Dakota in this situation. So they think they've got something, and that's not me telling you all to say, oh, they've definitely got something. I'm just telling you what their mindset is. We will all know the truth in 24 months. We will know, oh boy, did you botch this, or wow, you guys nailed this. So Ohio State's we're going to know if Corey Dennis and Ryan Day and those guys handled this correctly or not. It'll just take a little time to play out, but he's coming in for the official. I think this has been their guy now for probably a month or two, and it's just now starting to play out publicly.
They finally had time to go see him. Talk to him.
I've got a question for you guys, and I'll answer it as well. And it's kind of a two-parter. We've all gone through our score predictions. What is going to be the headline in the Sunday paper, in the Dispatch, and in the Detroit paper, talking about the game?
In Columbus, it's going to be. I don't know. I think should we save?
I have one too. I have one too.
Is it going to involve third base? Is the
Well,
question.
mine was a baseball analogy too.
Buckeyes hit home run.
Yeah.
I was going to say Harbaugh's Wolverines softly ground out.
Strikeout, either Michigan strikeout or a Buckeye home run.
Yeah, it feels like
Buckeye blitzes get home. So
it's gonna be revenge. That's what it feels like. This is every time Ohio State loses, like we said earlier, they tend to come back and thump that team the next, because you don't have a focus issue. Even it's never really a focus issue with Michigan, but I think where you have seen the focus changed this year. It's not that Ohio State was overlooking Michigan last year. It's just that Ohio State has for years sort of taken it as for granted that they're going to beat Michigan. It's just, of course they're going to beat Michigan. They beat Michigan every year. The only year from 2004 until 2021 that they didn't beat Michigan was the weird Luke Fickell year where they were 6-7.
And they were so close to completing
And
that
they
last
almost-
pass.
yeah, and they
Yes.
almost beat them that year too. And you look at the banners on the indoor field at the Woody Hayes, and it's them beating Clemson in the Sugar Bowl, them beating Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. Like that, the focus is win the college football playoff and go to the national championship. And beating Michigan is sort of almost like well, yes, of course they'll do that. And they talk about Michigan, and it's not that they don't pay attention to Michigan. They talk about it all the time. It's just sort of like, well, obviously we'll beat Michigan. It feels like it's sort of the attitude. That's not the case anymore. And when Ohio State is really focused and has brought in a defensive coordinator specifically to be able to stop Michigan and to win this game, that feels like a game that is very hard for the other team to win.
And the Detroit papers, what is the headline there?
Something about
Lions improve draft position.
No quorum, no problem. No, that's terrible.
Well, I mean,
if Michigan wins, it's probably something like that.
well, no, I was going to say if it goes the way we think it's going to go, the prediction on that.
Wolverines have trouble in Sun. I don't, Sun and no way too much.
Revenge best served warm.
Yes, revenge best served. 57 degrees. 57 degrees out.
Cheating refs cost Wolverines.
It'll be just home addresses of the refs of the game. That'll just be it.
You have Michigan fans in here pointing to Harbaugh taking an Iowa cast-off and getting him in the league, so he does have a history developing quarterbacks. Tony, would you like to explain your theory on Jim Harbaugh and quarterbacks?
Yes. And this is a theory that has continued to prove true, and I thought maybe J.J. McCarthy would be the guy that disproves it, but he's only proving it more. The longer a quarterback is with Jim Harbaugh, the worse he gets. And say what you want about Andrew Luck. That was a lifetime ago. And that was Andrew Luck, like a once-in-a-generation prospect. Anybody else, the longer that they are with Jim Harbaugh, the worse they get. That is why, still to this day, the best quarterback that Michigan has had under Jim Harbaugh was Jake Rudock, who was only there for 1 year and got the majority of his coaching from Iowa's offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at the time. And so the longer somebody's with, like Shea Patterson comes in, he lights out at Ole Miss, eventually loses the job there, but comes to Michigan. He's going to be the savior. It's Shea Patterson. Is he going to be the number 1 overall draft pick? Yes, but first he's going to go to Michigan. And then he gets worse as time goes on. Wilton Speight leads them to a number 3 ranking in 2016, loses the job the next year, has some injury issues and things of that nature. But the longer guys are with Jim Harbaugh, the worse they get. And we're kind of seeing that just in this season with J.J. McCarthy. Now, he may light it up. I've said that he needs to be Troy Smith in 2004 in this game. Run for 140, throw for 300. Just be a playmaker. Do whatever you have to do and make plays. Trust your abilities. Do not trust Jim Harbaugh. It's Luke Skywalker going in down the trench to destroy the Death Star. I think, Tom, we've talked about this before, where he needs to turn off the guidance of Jim Harbaugh and just trust his Jedi instincts and go from there.
I mean, if Jake Rudock is your flag carrier, that's like saying that the most productive president in the history of the country is Millard Fillmore.
I mean,
I just think it's hard to defend the quarterback development at this point. They've had so many 5-star guys now that if McCarthy doesn't blossom into a top flight quarterback, this isn't these are not his guys anymore.
Mm-hmm.
He's not, trying to take 3-star projects. He is recruiting. They're recruiting very well at the position, or have been.
Yeah.
2023 and 4 might disagree a little bit. I know they've lost some guys they're not happy about, but
aren't they still they're going to get in 24 the Jaden Davis?
Yeah, that's very possible.
But what are they going to do with him?
Right, and then it's going to be like, okay, if Jaden Davis in year 2 and 3 isn't a star, like what's the excuse now? And so that's been my thing. I think there are a lot of things that that Jim Harbaugh has brought to Michigan that are positives and probably upgrades over what their predecessors were bringing. But I don't know how you defend his quarterback development anymore. We have years of evidence now.
Well, and Michigan has had issues with offensive skill for years. Do you know, Mark, the last Michigan skill player to be drafted in the first round of the NFL draft?
I'm going to say Braylon Edwards.
Exactly right.
Okay.
2005, Braylon Edwards.
It was Furl Mangus.
That's wild. I mean, you think about. I mean, Michigan has not been, all caps Michigan for quite a while, and they were never, flinging the ball around, whatever. But Ohio State was never flinging the ball around, except then how many offensive skill guys has Ohio State gotten drafted in the first round since 2004?
Yeah, I'm going to bring that up.
That's going to include Santonio Holmes,
Many.
Ted Ginn. Was
Gonzo go first?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, he was
Anthony
last pick. He
Gonzalez.
was last pick of the first round to
Yeah.
Indianapolis. It was a little bit of a shock that he slid into
Yeah.
that spot.
But I mean, you go through and it's just Ezekiel Elliott was there. I mean, how many wide receivers have they put there? I mean, if you told me it was
Beanie Wells.
12 Ohio State skill guys, and 12 might honestly be low because you got a couple quarterbacks now. You got Dwayne Haskins, you got Justin Fields. I mean, it might be. I'm going to up my guess to 14. As Tony's counting. Hang on, he's
Burrow?
taking.
Joe
He's taking.
Burrow?
Tony had to take his shoes off.
He's taking his shoes off, so he must be over 10. Yes.
Let's rehash that one. Can Ohio State claim Joe Burrow? That seems like a good time to continue that obnoxious discussion. As Baylor,
Baylor missed the field.
I mean,
goal.
if Joe Burrow would stop showing up at Ohio State for
it's
big games,
Joe's
and-
like fueling the fire, right? He's pouring gas on it.
Mhm.
With Joe Burrow, it is 10.
With Joe Burrow, it's
But
10.
that's because you've got a lot of second rounders,
Uh-huh.
and they're like
Slackers.
Michael Thomas being a second rounder.
Yeah.
Terry McLaurin being a third rounder. But yeah, 10.
It's gotta be
It's Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Justin Fields.
You're not including Jamison Williams there.
Right, not including
Right.
Jamison Williams.
Dwayne Haskins.
Dwayne Haskins is the next one. And then it is, you've got to go to Ezekiel Elliott in 2016. And then you scroll down and it is like Carlos Hyde was a second rounder,
Yeah.
but you've got to get to,
You go all the way to, is it like probably the Beanie group?
it's Beanie in 2009. And then you scroll down some more, and that's when you get into Ted Ginn and Gonzo, and Santonio is the last one.
Okay. Wow.
And then the year before, it's like Chris Gamble and Michael Jenkins are both in there in 2004 as first rounders. But so you were wrong, Tom.
That's a shame.
Much
Well,
closer, Ohio State, Michigan, than you thought.
all right, so it has finally happened. So I guess it's time to wrap up the show then, right? I mean, we're north of 2 hours and 12 minutes. So we set out to do 2 hours and 12 minutes of content. We have hit that mark.
Boom.
So
Tom wants to get home to
Let's-
put on his Hawkeye colors, his black and yellow suspenders, shirtless, of course, and cheer on his Hawkeyes.
I have a barrel that
Yeah,
I
I'm
wear.
gonna say it's a barrel, so it's okay to be shirtless.
All right, let's run around real quick. Everyone give one final, like the 30 seconds of final thought on the game and what you expect to happen.
I guess I get to go first and give it zero thought. I expect to see Blake Corum out there. I don't think he's going to be nearly as effective as Michigan fans are hoping for. A lot of credit to him for trying to go out there and gut it out, but it won't be enough. I think that we will see J.J. McCarthy underthrow a couple of balls that maybe end up either getting flags or back shoulder fades, but I don't think that the Michigan defense is going to be able to slow down the Ohio State passing offense enough. But at the end of the day, I think as long as Ohio State gets off to a quick start, that this is going to shape up to be a good day in Columbus, and then it'll be a bad day in Indianapolis 7 days later.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think Corum is not going to be anywhere near 100%, and I think that's going to hurt Michigan a lot. I think because not only not having him 100% just in a vacuum, but also I think it's going to take them. You're not going to just put him out there for one snap and be like, oh, he doesn't have it today.
Right.
And it's going to be a
You're
constant
sorry.
struggle. Yeah, no, it's going to be a constant struggle to kind of figure that out and what your rotation is going to look like. On the other hand, I think Ryan Day, and I think he will be, but it's kind of key for me on the other end, is Ryan Day needs to be decisive about his running back rotation. You can't go in there for 2 quarters and change watching a guy miss holes before you pull the plug. So I think Day, I think Mayan will play a lot. I do think Dallin Hayden should play a lot. I think he will play a significant role. So I think they'll figure out their running back rotation a little better versus Michigan trying to figure theirs out on the fly. And I think Marvin Harrison Jr. has at least 1 long touchdown and maybe a second deep ball to set up another one. I think he gets him vertically a couple of times, and that'll be just about the difference.
Yeah, if CJ can hit those vertical shots to Marvin, and especially in single coverage, but even fitting them between the corner and the safety. But if he's got time, I think Michigan's going to have to blitz to get to him consistently. And so it'll be up to CJ Stroud to get the ball away and get it to the right read on those blitzes. I think then Jim Knowles on first down is going to do some run blitzing to get into the backfield and to disrupt and get Michigan off schedule so that they have a 2nd and long or a 2nd and 10 or whatever. And so does Michigan counter that with some first down throws? And if you do, and you throw incomplete, now you've played exactly into Jim Knowles' hands. So there's a little catch-22 for Michigan there, where it's like they want to try to break tendencies, but the reason they don't use those is because they don't always work. So I think Ohio State throws the ball well. I think they run it well enough. They catch Michigan in terms of the numbers. If Michigan's going to stay in nickel, you're going to run the ball. And but as Mark said, you can't waste 2 series to see if this guy can do it. You've got to know right now, and you've got to know on the first couple of carries whether he can or not. But I think Ohio State throws the ball, runs it well enough. Jim Knowles is brought in to win this game, and he will disrupt them.
Yeah, and the question with Corum and the question with Edwards in terms of health and how much are they going to play, that's so fascinating. That is what almost determines this game, because if it's CJ Stokes starting and those 2 guys aren't playing, then this is going to go poorly for Michigan. I do expect probably both of those guys to play and one of those guys to have 10, 12 carries, but I don't know that, we have seen Jim Harbaugh absolutely try to grind Blake Corum into dust over the course of the season and just constant 28 carry games. Do either of those guys have more than 15 carries on Saturday?
Well, if Blake Corum carries the ball 28 times, does Michigan win because he's able to play the entire game and they are sustaining drives?
Yeah, but I mean, how likely is it that Blake Corum is going to carry the ball 28 times?
I don't think it's likely.
I don't think it's likely either. And I just, if Blake Corum has 6 carries or 10 carries, and then either he's on a pitch count or he can't quite go. And then you have Donovan Edwards, who, he's been okay on the ground, but again, you haven't faced a rush defense as good as Ohio State's rush defense. It feels like JJ McCarthy is going to have to win this game for Michigan, whether it's with his legs or with his arm, one way or the other, in order for Michigan to win. And they would have to hold Ohio State down in the red zone. You got to have, if JJ McCarthy is picking up 6 first downs with his legs and completing 2 passes more than 35 yards in the air, and Ohio State is kicking 3 field goals, then Michigan has a clear path to victory to me. But that's a lot of if, and then if, and then if. And I don't see all of those things lining up for them.
I will say Blake Corum only carried the ball 6 times last year against Ohio State, and look what happened.
That's true. Hassan Haskins, Tony.
What about him?
There's a door over there. Do you think he's going to walk through it?
I'm unfamiliar with that person.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. I want to thank you all for joining us on a Friday afternoon here, wherever you are. As always, please check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. As Mark said, if we can get 100 annual members, he will jump into a lake or river or a man-made pond.
What about you in the T-Rex outfit?
We put a pole up, vote up, and we'll give them 4 or 5 bodies of water in the state of Ohio, and we can vote which one they want to see me jump in.
Is there a fountain in downtown Indianapolis?
Oh yes.
I will be in Canton.
Is there a fountain in Canton?
You don't want to jump in.
I don't want to jump in.
It's over at Swenson's. It's with Galley Boy sandwiches.
There's a little stream right by the Hall of Fame that used to. We don't have to walk over anymore. They've they've moved where the media parks. We used to have to walk over this little bridge over the stream to get up to the Hall of Fame for the stadium for the state championship games. That would be
Jump off the bridge into
miserably
the water.
frigid to come down after like at 11 o'clock at night after Glenville wins the.
No, you jump into it and then you go cover the game.
No, that ain't happening. Those press boxes aren't heated very well.
No, they are not. But as always, as I said, BuckeyeHuddle.com, become a member, say hello to us there, and you can find us here at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle as well. I want to thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys later.